Hey guys and welcome back to my channel. This is part 4 of What If Naruto Was in World of Warcraft. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and also go and support the author, link in description. Naruto struggled in his chains, shouting and letting out roars that shook the ground. His slitted red eyes were glaring deadly at the undead group and everyone around him. The strangest thing was that no one was afraid, no one even flinched as they saw him, no one glared, spat or called him a demon, monster, abomination. The blonde roared again and shifted in his chains. The undead group would just look at him emotionless and not do anything. Naruto glanced around and his eyes widened for the first time as he looked around and saw where he was. He wondered how he didn't see this before. Maybe his fit of rage blocked his view. Now, looking carefully around, he saw that he was in some sort of sewer. No, scratch that, it looked like an underground sewer city. Yes, that is the correct term. The reason was he could see on each side of the green sewer-like river. Looking up, Naruto could see the ceiling. It was quite far. Judging from the distance, he deducted that Kyuubi could fit here perfectly and even have more room to stretch and jump. Looking to his right, he saw some strange shops. Well, they didn't look like shops. They were just some tables with merchandise on them, and behind said table more merchandise suspended on the wall. Of course an undead would be the shopkeeper. The blonde heard some heavy footsteps all of a sudden. He even heard the girls gasp in fear. Looking in front of him, he saw the strangest thing he had ever seen. There stood a massive creature. Yes, a creature. This creature looked like it was created from multiple body parts. It had a normal human head. Well, maybe a bit larger. It had two massive arms holding a one-edge axe each hand, and sprouting out of his back there was another arm that held a scythe. His stomach was open and his inner organs could be seen. His ribs were coming out of its stomach. It also seemed like one eye was bigger than the other and his mouth was open on one side all the time, like it was stuck that way. As the creature passed the group, Naruto saw that it was bigger than a normal human. Heck, it was bigger than an elf. The creature also seemed to carry a strange green smoke around it. As it passed the blonde, he could feel getting a little sick and dizzy. It seemed like the smoke was to make the enemy vulnerable. Glancing behind, Naruto saw the girls breathe in relief as the creature passed them without doing anything. The blonde then glanced around and saw some undead with an evil glint in their eyes as they were looking at the two girls. He grit his teeth and roared again, shaking the ground. The group had to stop and wait for the minor earthquake to stop. The blonde was trashing in his chains again. One of the undead jailers came to the blonde and grabbed him by the throat and turned him to look in his eyes. "Keep quiet and stop that or else," the undead warned as he dropped the blonde on the ground. Naruto looked up at the undead and growled, but he complied nonetheless. He would make the undead suffer later. He was in no mood for being pushed around now, and he definitely didn't like being pushed around again. He had taken enough pushing around when he was in Konoha. He would not take it again. The group continued their walk towards who knows where. Or at least Naruto and the girls didn't know where they were being taken. They could only wait and see. As they were walking, Naruto couldn't help but feel more and more disgusted. He had never seen things like this. As they were walking, Naruto saw a group of undead feeding on recent dead bodies. They passed by what looked to be the research part of the city where bodies were being taken, and the undead would mutilate them and then combine them to create a new creature, most likely an abomination like he had seen before. The group came to a halt in front of a big entrance. Two undead guards looked over the group before nodding and letting them pass. The group entered and found themselves in a long tunnel of some sort. As they were walking through the tunnel, Naruto looked around and saw guards on each side of the wall. They were close to each other, rather good defenses, he had to admit. Naruto looked up front and he could see the end of the tunnel. They entered a round room. In the middle there was what seemed a round platform or stage. On it stood a night elf woman. She had a dark cowl over her head, two purple lines coming down from her eyes on her cheeks. She had a black armor and black robe-like pants. Her gloves were also black, her shoes the same, and she had black shoulder pads that seemed to protect even her neck. Her clothes looked regal. The design was meant to be regal from what it seemed, though Naruto was curious as to why there was a night elf here. The woman looked down at the group. She walked down from the podium and stopped in front of Naruto. She put her hand under his chin and lifted his head to look in his bloody red eyes. A smirk appeared on her face as she looked in those eyes. This is what she was looking for. The blonde was looking up at her face, her pale face. The blonde thought there was some connection between her and the undead if she could move freely. Naruto glanced around and saw that the undead were all bowing down to the woman. He looked back at the woman and saw the smirk on her face. He sneered at her, not caring what the consequences would be, not caring what would happen. He knew for sure that he didn't like that smirk and he would show it. The woman was taken by surprise by the boldness of the blonde. She saw that undead ready to jump on the child and punish him for his act, but she stopped them before they did so. Looking back at the child, she grinned. "Welcome to my city, to our city," she said solemnly. The blonde raised an eyebrow. "Your city?" asked the blonde. "Since when does a night elf rule over the undead?" he asked. The woman growled and glared at the blonde. "Watch your tongue, boy, I am not a night elf and never was." "Then tell me how come you are tall as night elf and have pointy ears?" demanded the blonde, growling back at her, showing that he would not submit to her authority. The woman saw what he was doing and smirked. She already liked the way he acted, though she was a little annoyed that he wouldn't submit to her authority. This was her domain, she ruled here and she would be respected by a flesh bag. "I was a high elf," responded the woman, "but I died in the way. Long story short, I became an undead, but I still look like high elf, only difference is my skin color," the woman said. "High elf?" asked Naruto. He then remembered what he had read from the books. Yes, the high elves used to work hand in hand with the humans, but when the plague hit, the capital city of the high elves was destroyed, many died and the survivors changed their names in blood elves. They even broke apart from the human alliance and became their enemies. The woman turned her back at Naruto and walked back up at the podium. A throne suddenly rose from the ground and the woman sat cross-legged on the throne. Her eyes kept a complete lock with the blonde's. Naruto didn't even blink. He would not show any sign of weakness to the woman, but he was curious as to who she was. "So this is the child?" she finally asked as an undead stood up and nodded. "Yes, mistress, this is the child that we have been telling you about." The undead crackled. Suddenly metallic footsteps were heard. The blonde turned around and saw the undead he had seen in the forest when he was running with Phinia from Stormwind. The undead bowed down to the woman and then stood back up. "This is the child I saw," the armored undead said. The woman nodded and looked at the blonde. "Now, I am sure you are curious as to who I am," she said as Naruto just nodded once. "I am Sylvana's Windrunner, the Banshee Queen, ruler of the Forsaken and Undercity." Naruto narrowed his eyes and growled. "So you are the one that ordered the kidnapping of my loves," he said, dangerously letting killer intent come out of him. The woman just smirked. It seemed like she wasn't affected by the killer intent at all. In fact, she seemed to be pleased with the massive killer intent coming out of the blonde. Other people would have started cowering and fleeing in fright, but no, this woman didn't. She just stood there smirking at the blonde. Oh, how much it pissed off Naruto. "Well, I can see that you have a lot of power and anger," the woman said, laughing. "What do you want of us?" demanded the blonde, trying to break the chains again. "Ah yes, straight to the point," she said with a smirk. "I want your power." The blonde narrowed his eyes. She said it just like the Akatsuki. No way in hell will they extract Kyuubi out of him. The blonde continued to trash around and yell. He felt like a trapped animal. He felt like doom was coming towards him at a rapid pace. "Stop trashing," an undead demanded as he hit the blonde on the back of his head, making him fall on his face. The blonde growled and looked at the undead. Suddenly a knife pierced the undead's skull and he dropped on the ground with a loud thud. The blonde looked up at the woman and saw her standing up holding a knife in her right hand while her left hand was stretched towards the undead that had dropped on the ground. She looked to be pissed. The woman looked around and growled at the undead in the room, making them back away and cower in fear. "What did I tell you?" she demanded. Everyone stood silent. "I said that no harm has to come to the boy," she shouted at them. Naruto's eyes widened, wondering why the queen of the undead would protect him. The woman stood up straight and placed her knife on the throne. She walked over to the blonde and picked him up and placed him back on his feet. "We need him. You will treat him with respect," she told them angrily. The blonde was shocked now. Why would the ruler of the undead say something like that? Heck, why would she kill one of her own? Looking around, he saw that every single undead was complying to her wish. He looked back at her and saw her staring down at him directly in his eyes. "Why did you do that?" asked Naruto. "Because we need you," she responded. "My power?" asked the blonde, raising an eyebrow. The woman nodded. "Yes, your power, we need your help," she said. The blonde chalked on his spit and so did the two girls as they were looking dumbfounded at the queen. Did she just say that she needs help? This was something that no one would hear. It was impossible. It had to be a trick. The queen of the undead would never ask a human for help. "What the hell?" shouted Naruto. The woman shook her head and walked back to her throne. She sat down and did a motion with her hand. One of the undead nodded and left the room, only to come back followed by another undead. Naruto looked at him. He was a warlock, but unlike the other undead he had a tabard, a different on. The tabard was a light blue horde symbol on a dark blue background with white skull trim. The undead had a frightening scythe on his back that was glowing black, a deadly black color. The undead looked at the blonde from under his mask. He walked over to him and grabbed his chin with his skeleton hand. He looked in his red eyes studying him, trying to measure his power from what it seemed. He let go of the blonde who growled at being rudely picked on. The undead turned to the queen and bowed. "You may stand up," the queen said. "So this is the great power you offer me?" the undead asked in a dark and deadly voice. "Yes, his power will help both of us," Sylvanas answered as she glanced over to the blonde. The undead looked back at Naruto, he then looked back at the queen and nodded. "This will do nicely," he said as he turned to the blonde. Naruto looked at the undead and waited. He wondered what the undead would do. The undead suddenly moved his hand in his robe. The blonde tensed, wondering what he will do. Then the undead took his hand out. He was holding a scroll. The blonde raised an eyebrow. "Free him," demanded the warlock. The undeads complied and broke the chains holding Naruto. The blonde stretched his hands and looked at the warlock. The undead walked up to him and handed Naruto the scroll. The blonde raised an eyebrow and looked at him for answers. "We have 2 tasks for you, human," the undead said. "Tasks?" asked Naruto. The undead nodded. "Lady Sylvanas has her own task for you, while I have my own task." "And what would that be?" the blonde asked carefully. "I am part of the Horde organization, and we need you to bring back a member that has been captured by the Scarlet Crusade," the undead said deadly. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he heard the name of the Crusade. "Why would you need me for the task?" he asked. "The Crusade is guarding our member with paladins. Their holy fire will burn us and make us more vulnerable. You, on the other hand, it will not affect you." "And you want me to free your member?" asked Naruto, puzzled. "That is right," the warlock answered. "He holds valuable information on a certain lich and on the Crusade," he said with venom. "Which brings us to my request," said Sylvanas, making Naruto look up at her. "And that is?" he asked. "Kill Kel'Thuzad," the queen answered seriously. Phinia and Saya gasped as they heard that. "He can't do that," shouted Phinia. The queen looked at them. "He will, he has to." Naruto groaned. He also knew who this Kel'Thuzad is and he knew that he couldn't take him on. "And how do you know I can do it?" he asked. "That is simple," grinned Sylvanas. "I can feel a hidden power inside of you." Naruto narrowed his eyes. It seemed like everyone could feel Kyuubi inside of him. He looked at the queen and the warlock. "What if I refuse?" he asked. "Then we will make you," the undead replied. "How?" asked Naruto. The queen pointed to the 2 girls, making Naruto narrow his eyes. He growled, "If you dare to touch a single piece of hair, I will have your head." He spat at the woman. The undead in the room looked at each other in surprise. No one had ever dared to stand up to the queen of the undead. The woman just smirked at his boldness. "We will not harm them as long as you do what we demand," she said. Naruto growled, but he saw that indeed there was no way out. "Fine, who do I need to rescue?" he asked. "His name is Sodran," responded the undead warlock. "Fine," said Naruto, "but I will not be able to take on Kel'Thuzad right now, I am too weak," he said. "Then get stronger, but you will not leave this place," said the queen. "For now you will rest, tomorrow night you will attack the Scarlet Monastery," said Sylvanas. Naruto grumbled and nodded. A group of undead came to take him away, but he stopped them. "I will not go alone, the girls will stay with me, I do not trust anyone here to leave them with," he said. The queen rolled her eyes and nodded. "Fine, take all 3 in the same room," she said. The undead guard nodded and escorted the blonde and the 2 girls out of the room. They didn't walk too long as they reached a strange door. Opening it, they found it was a prison cell. Is this what they said is a room? Before the blonde could complain or anything, he was pushed inside, and the girls as well. The door was locked behind them, leaving them in darkness. The only light coming was from a small hole in the ceiling that seemed to lead to the outside. The blonde walked over to the light so Phinia and Saya could see him. The 2 girls, seeing him there, walked over to him and tackled him in a hug. The blonde held them close and looked up at the hole. "Naruto, you can't go," said Phinia. "Go where?" he asked. "Don't go and fight Kel'Thuzad, you can't defeat him," she cried. "He is too strong. He is one of the leader of the scourge here in Azeroth, you will die if you go," said Saya. The blonde tightened the hold on them. "I know, but if I don't do what they ask they will hurt you," he said. "But we can't lose you," Saya cried. "You won't," replied Naruto as he kissed both girls on the cheek. He looked back up at the ceiling trying to figure out a way out. You won't be able to fight him alone, said Phinia. Tell Sylvanas to let us come with you, she told the blonde. If I do that she would think that I would use the opportunity to escape with you. He responded, she will not let me. Naruto broke the hug and walked back a little. He shifted into a large fox and walked back to the girls and looked at them. Come on, we need to sleep, it's cold here and the way you are dressed you will catch a cold, he told them as he laid down. Phinia and Seiya snuggled in his fur and the blonde wrapped his tails around the two girls holding them. He looked up at the ceiling. He would figure out a way to escape, he just needed to think about this. Naruto felt Phinia shiver. He looked at her and saw that she had fallen asleep but was shivering. It was either from the cold or from fright of the undead. After all, an undead tried to assassinate her on a ship. Maybe it was the Forsaken, maybe it was the Scourge, but they would try again, who knows. The blonde curled around the two girls and gently touched Phinia's cheek with his nose. He licked her cheek and she seemed to calm down a little. Naruto looked at Seiya and saw her spacing out looking in the darkness. He moved one of his tails and started passing his tail on the elf's cheek. The girl looked at the blonde and smiled reassuringly at him, but he could see that she was worried for him. Seiya looked back in the darkness continuing to space out. It made the blonde wonder what she was thinking about. The look on her face made it seem like the thoughts were grim, like she was thinking that she might lose someone precious to her. The blonde couldn't help but think that she was thinking about him. Sighing, the blonde put his head down on the cold floor and closed his eyes. He would need all the sleep he can get to regain most of his strength and fight the crusade. Naruto opened his eyes hearing a powerful knock. Looking around he could see anything. It was like the light had completely disappeared. Maybe it was dark already. He heard the knock again and this time it was accompanied by a voice, a crackling voice. Wake up, it's time, the voice said. Naruto groaned and tried to stand up but he felt something holding him down. Looking around he could vaguely see the girls still sleeping on him. He wondered how they could sleep so much. He used his tails to lift them and gently placed them down on the floor. He didn't want to but there was no other option. Feeling like something was moving them, Phinia and Seiya opened their eyes only to be welcomed by complete darkness. They thought that something had happened, that while they were sleeping God knows what happened to their eyes' sight. Looking around they saw a pair of red slitted eyes. At first they would have screamed and be afraid but they realized that the eyes could only belong to Naruto. Naruto? Asked Phinia. Yes, it's me. The blonde's voice could be heard where the pair of eyes were. Why is it so dark? Asked Seiya. Night time, answered the blonde. Naruto then changed back to his human form. Kage Bushin no Jutsu, he said, and a puff of smoke was heard. The girls wondered what he was doing. Then all of a sudden the room started to gain light. They looked around and saw Naruto with his hands in a seal, his eyes closed and red energy coming out of him and going inside an identical clone. The girls watched amazed as the clone's features started to change. Its nails grew becoming claws, its eyes turned red and slitted, the canines grew longer, his hair became wilder and more feral, and finally the whisker marks became more accentuated. The red energy stopped coming out of Naruto and the light died. A pair of red eyes started looking around and then a demonic voice could be heard. Why do I always end up in the dark? The voice asked, making Phinia and Seiya afraid. Kyuubi, I have a favor to ask of you, said the blonde. Phinia and Seiya narrowed their eyes as they heard the name Kyuubi. And that would be? The voice asked again, only this time it seemed peaceful and calm. I want you to look after Seiya and Phinia and make sure no harm comes to them while I am away, replied Naruto. If you are leaving me here in a clone then you should know I will be pushed back in the seal, replied Kyuubi. Yes, I know, but I gave you 8 tails worth of power and I worked over the seal a little. Once I will get out of range from you we will both feel some pain. The seal will slowly start to take you back inside of me, replied Naruto. Let me get this straight, the fox said. You made a timer on the seal? He asked. Yes, I gave you 8 tails, meaning that I have up to 30 minutes before you are completely sucked back in the seal, replied the blonde. And what about the pain? Kyuubi asked, serious. I am not in the mood to feel excruciating pain. There will be pain, but not excruciating, that I can assure you, replied Naruto. Fine, said Kyuubi. I will look after the 2 girls but get you ass back here fast, he demanded. Right, said Naruto. The door suddenly opened and the room was flooded by light, making everyone but Kyuubi cover their eyes at the light coming in. The warlock from before entered the room and looked around. He saw the cubified clone and wondered what that was, but he ignored it. He turned to the blonde and took his arm and started walking out the door. Naruto, be careful, called Phinia right before the door closed. Kyuubi sneered as the door closed. He better come back in one piece, I don't want to start healing everything, he said, and then winced in pain. Yep, light pain, but endurable, he thought. Naruto stood outside of the ruins of Lord Eren. He was escorted out of Undercity by the warlock and about 10 other undead. He found out how to get out of the city and he was already planning an escape. Naruto opened the scroll and read its contents. He had to go to the Scarlet Monastery and find the graveyard and cathedral. Sodren was in one of them. The blonde looked behind him and the warlock gave him his dagger and sword. The blonde narrowed his eyes, wondering when they took his weapons. He grabbed them and strapped them around his waist. Looking at the scroll again, he dashed away following the map. As Naruto was running through the forest, he saw a lot of strange animals, strange light blue dogs that seemed and looked demonic of nature, rather big bats that could match up to a human's height, and much more. The trees were dead, they looked dead at least, their bark was covered in worms. The blonde started running up a road towards a big structure. He could see the strange structure in the distance. Unlike other building, it didn't look rundown and it seemed like someone was living there. As he got closer, he could see skeletons, undead and humans strangled in the trees. He looked on the scroll again and realized that he was getting close to the monastery. The blonde twitched, a sharp pain passed through his body and felt he gained one tail from Kyuubi. It only meant that the fox had 7 tails left. The blonde sped up. As he reached the entrance, he jumped on the roof of the building and looked around. There were living beings here, people, and they were all part of the Scarlet Crusade. So far the blonde could see mages, warriors, hunters and priests. Naruto started walking on the roof while looking carefully around him. He could see a graveyard in the distance, but there was something strange. There were spirits there, ghosts, and not even a sign of the crusade. The blonde jumped down in the graveyard and in one of the bushes. He looked around and he saw 3 crypts, one in front of him that was open and guarded by skeletons, and one on his left and the other on his right, both closed. The blonde looked behind him and saw a door. It was opened and it was leading inside the monastery, maybe an alternative entrance to the place. The blonde carefully sneaked inside so as not to draw attention to himself. As he walked inside, he hid behind a crate. He could see Scarlet Crusade members patrolling the hallway. The blonde looked around and found a door at the far end of the hallway, but the only way to get there was to fight the guards, 4 of them. The blonde waited. When the guards turned around and started walking towards the door at the far end of the hallway, Naruto came out from behind the crate and drew his weapons. He slowly walked to the patrol and looked at them. 2 were paladins from what it seemed and 2 were warriors. The blonde walked towards one of the paladins. He crouched down and continued to follow the patrol. When he was close enough, Naruto jumped on the paladin. Said paladin dropped on the ground and Naruto stabbed the paladin in the throat with his dagger. He jumped of the paladin, avoiding a sword. Scourge filth, one of the guards said. Naruto sneered and charged. He raised his sword and lowered it above one of the warriors. The warrior blocked the attack and Naruto slashed him on the chest with his dagger. He then jumped away and the warrior was cut in half by the remaining paladin's sword. Blood sprayed everywhere and Naruto grinned under his mask. He charged the shocked paladin and jumped up with the intent to cut his head off. Suddenly Naruto was kicked away and into a wall. He looked to see who it was and saw the remaining warrior had kicked him away to protect his comrade. The paladin shook himself out of his shock and charged the blonde with his sword raised. He lowered the sword and Naruto jumped away. The blonde then raised his sword to block the warrior's attack. He looked at the paladin and saw his left hand glowing yellow. Before he could even blink, a yellow shockwave hit the blonde in the chest and sent him flying in the nearby wall. Naruto groaned as he looked up at the paladin. He had done some strange spell on him. The smirked. If they wanted a spell fight, then they will get a spell fight. He jumped in his stance and fire started to develop in his hands. He fired a fireball at the paladin. His eyes widened when the paladin just dodged the fireball. The warrior attacked Naruto, taking him by surprise. The blonde started dodging the sword. He then delivered a kick in the warrior's chin and sent him flying away in a nearby wall. The blonde then fired a frostbolt at him, hitting him full on. Naruto then charged the warrior and raised his sword. Naruto was about to cut the warrior when the paladin appeared in front of him and thrusted his sword to try and stab Naruto in the chest. Naruto turned his body to the side and dodged the attack. He twisted his leg and kicked the paladin in the face, sending him crashing in his comrade. The blonde then charged again and raised his sword. He lowered it in the paladin's chest straight in the heart. The sword went through the paladin and stabbed the warrior as well, killing both of them. Naruto took his sword out and felt strange. He looked at his sword and saw it was forming a dark glow. He shrugged it off and sheathed his weapons. He started walking away. He reached the door at the end of the hallway and entered the room. he looked around and saw another door that was closed to his left. He walked over to the door and opened it. He stepped inside and narrowed his eyes. He was inside a torture room. From what it seemed that there were about 10 Crusade members inside and they were all looking at him. "Oops," said Naruto, "wrong room." He chuckled as he started backing away slowly. "Trespasser," shouted one of the members of the Crusade and charged Naruto, trying to deliver a punch. Naruto ducked and the man flew over him, crashing in the wall and falling unconscious. The blonde's sweat dropped and turned around. The other 9 Crusade members charged at the same time. Naruto unsheathed his weapons and moved his sword to strike. His attack was parried by another sword. He jumped away, avoiding an attack. The blonde spun around and tried to slash the enemy behind him. He missed, but the sword fired a strange dark and purpled ball towards the enemy, hitting him and making him yell in pain. The dark glow disappeared from the sword. Naruto would have stopped and looked at his sword awestruck, but he couldn't. He jumped on a wall, avoiding a fireball, and then jumped on the mage that fired it. He cut his throat with his dagger. Suddenly the dagger started giving a green glow. The blonde didn't notice this and continued fighting. Suddenly, as Naruto cut one of the mages on the chest, the mage was suddenly surrounded by a green glow that exploded where he was cut, making him fly away and hitting the nearby wall and making him lose conscious. The blonde grinned. He ducked and avoided another sword. He passed through a series of hand signs and pointed towards a warrior. "Moonfire," he said as a ray fell from the ceiling on the warrior, making him cry in pain. The blonde used this opportunity to stab him in the chest and kill him. The sword started glowing again and Naruto looked around and saw a paladin. He tried a vertical slash. He missed. He tried an upward cut. It was parried. Naruto growled and spun around. He appeared behind the paladin and was about to stab him when the paladin raised his hand up and a yellow orb appeared in his hand. The orb exploded and yellow fire shot from the paladin's legs in a circle. The fire caught Naruto and the blonde felt like something was burning his feet. He grit his teeth in pain and raised his sword, blocking the paladin's sword. Naruto then foot stabbed the paladin with his dagger. The paladin yelled in pain and lowered his body to try and grab his foot. Naruto raised his dagger and slashed the paladin in the middle of the face, spraying blood everywhere and killing the said paladin in one go. The paladin dropped on his back dead and Naruto charged the nearest target. Naruto moved his sword for a vertical slash on a warrior and the same dark and purple bolt shot from the sword and hit the warrior. While he was crying in pain, Naruto cut his head off. The blonde looked around and saw that there were only 3 more left, a mage and 2 warriors. Naruto charged forward with his sword and dagger in hand. The mage fired a frostbolt towards him. The blonde jumped to the side and avoided the attack, and at the same time he changed his attack course, going straight towards the mage. The blonde vanished from sight just before the mage could do anything. The Crusade members stopped dead in their tracks, trying to figure out where he went. Suddenly the blonde appeared in front of the mage and thrusted his sword in the mage's chest, killing him. The 2 warriors charged forward with a battle cry and their swords raised. As they go closer, the blonde just stood there doing nothing. When they reached the blonde, they lowered their sword, cutting Naruto in half. They smirked, thinking he was dead, but all of a sudden the blonde disappeared in a puff of smoke. Before they could comprehend what happened, a sword came out of one warrior's chest and a dagger out of the other one. The 2 warriors dropped dead on the ground and Naruto, who was right behind them, sheathed his weapons. He looked around the torture room. Yep, there were undead here, but it seemed like they weren't alive anymore. He sighed and walked out the room through another door. Naruto twitched in pain again as the second tail came back to him. Kyuubi had only 6 tails now. The blonde sped through the empty hallways. He at first wondered why they were empty, but then remembered that there are Crusade members in Stormwind. It must be that they all came from the monastery. The blonde ran out a door straight in a courtyard. He could see a fountain in the middle on the courtyard, and to his left he saw a large door and about 6 Crusade members guarding it. Naruto jumped in a bush as he heard someone opening the door he had just come through. He looked to see who it was. Coming out of the door were 3 warriors, from the Crusade of course, behind them 2 mages, behind said mages was an undead that was chained, behind the undead were 3 priests and 2 paladins. Naruto watched as the group walked over to the large doors. He saw them starting to talk and listened carefully. "Good, take him inside for purification, orders from Migraine," said one of the guards. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that. He wondered what purification is, but if it was the Crusade talking, it could only mean that they will kill the undead. Naruto watched as a strange dark glow appeared in the undead's hands before it disappeared. He looked at his face and saw a smirk. Yet the undead was planning an escape or an honorable dead. The group walked inside and the doors closed. Naruto started walking through the bushes and then up on the wall. He positioned himself above the large door and took out 6 shuriken. He threw then each at a guard, hitting them in the head and killing them. He then jumped down and took the shuriken out of their skulls. He cleaned the blood of them and placed them back inside his pouch. The blonde was about to open the door and step inside when an evil thought passed through his mind. He smirked as he started to change. The undead was on his knees in front of an altar inside the cathedral. He looked up at his executioner and growled. It sounded frightening, but it didn't scare the paladin. Said paladin walked over to the undead and looked at him in the eyes. "Are you going to talk?" he asked. The undead cursed in so many ways in his language, but the paladin didn't understand anything. The undead spat on the paladin's shoes, making said paladin angry. "I take that as a no." "Very well then," he said as he unsheathed his sword. "Let the execution." He was about to finish the story, but a powerful roar stopped him. He looked at the large door. Everyone in the cathedral turned to look. Suddenly the doors were blasted open and a giant fox, about 4 to 5 meters tall with 9 tails swinging behind it, appeared. Everyone stood gaping at the fox. Said fox was glaring at everyone except the undead. It looked at the undead and what seemed to be a smirk appeared on the fox's face. The undead smirked as well and concentrated. Suddenly dark energy surrounded him and exploded all around him, throwing the paladin away and any Scarlet Crusade member close enough. The blast disintegrated the chains and the undead was now free. Naruto started running through the long hallway, knocking down every single Crusade member he came across. He used his tails to kick them away. He stopped in front of the undead and picked him up with one of his tails. "What are you doing?" demanded the undead. "I was sent by Sylvanas," replied Naruto, and the undead nodded. The blonde then placed the undead on his back and started running away towards the exit. "Stop them," commanded the paladin, Migraine. A group of Scarlet Crusade ran to the door and closed it. Naruto hit the door with his head, but the door didn't even flinch. Instead, Naruto felt dizzy. He dropped on the ground and blinked. The undead looked around and saw the Crusade members closing in on them, a large group, over 50. Naruto groaned and changed back to his human form. The undead dropped on the ground and looked around, trying to figure out what was happening. His eyes widened as he saw a human rogue in front of him glaring at the Scarlet members. "You are the one she sent?" he asked. "Got a problem?" asked Naruto, annoyed. "You're just a kid," he yelled. "And you're an undead, but you don't see me pointing that out," shouted Naruto. "You don't know how much I had to kill to get to you," he whined. "You were dead, undead lover," spat a Crusade member. A vein appeared on Naruto's head. "Hey, I'm doing this because I have to, it's not like I have a choice," he yelled. The undead wondered what he meant, but he didn't have time to ponder on it as a sword appeared out of nowhere ready to strike. Naruto appeared in front of the undead and blocked the sword. He pushed it away and grabbed a nearby mage. He kicked him in the chin and threw a rock on in his head. "Better get ready, this is going to be one hell of a fight," said Naruto to the undead, who grabbed a random staff from the ground. "Damn, I need my armor," the undead crackled. Naruto and Sodren looked over the forces of Scarlet Crusade. The undead looked a little bored and pissed off. Naruto, on the other hand, was trying to figure out a plan. Sure, he got in with a rather interesting, a freaky entrance, but he now had to get out. He could shift back in his fox form, or he could fight them and just run after that. Oh, so many possibilities. A smirk appeared on Naruto's face as he thought of something. He closed his eyes and concentrated. Then, without any kind of warning, strange red energy shot out of him and started spiraling around him. Everyone took a step back in wonder and fright. The undead just stood there unfazed, thought he was a bit curious how the brat was getting stronger by the second. Sodren looked at the blonde, curious to see what was happening. He saw his nails elongating into claws, his frame became more feral and had more muscles. He thought he saw the kid's canines elongating under his mask. Then, the boy's eyes snapped open to reveal a pair of red-slitted eyes instead of the original blue ones. The Scarlet members took a step back and watched in fright the changes that occurred. The undead was impressed. The boy was now at the same level as he was. It should be a piece of cake for him to deal with these guys now. Still, it was strange that the boy gained so much power all of a sudden. He wondered where it came from and how he got so much power. He also wondered how the hell he managed to hide it. The boy seemed like a weak fool when he first stepped through those doors. Naruto snarled at the men around him, making them take another step back. The blonde was suddenly enjoying this. He loved inducing fear in the hearts of bastards like the Scarlet Crusade. The blonde spinned his sword on the tip of his fingers while looking around at the enemy, trying to see who was foolish enough to attack him. He looked at the paladin and saw that he was a little afraid now of him. This brought a smirk on the boy's face. The undead looked at the staff in his hand. It was a piece of crap. He threw it on the ground and turned around. he started walking towards the large door. The blonde turned around and looked at him wondering where the hell he was going. Wasn't he supposed to get him out of here? Why was he walking away? He could stay and help him, not that he needed help, didn't he? Hey, shouted Naruto, where the hell are you going? He demanded. The undead opened the large doors and looked back at the blonde with lazy eyes. Get my armor back, of course. What did you expect, to fight with trash items? He asked as he walked out the door. Great, mumbled Naruto, I have to hold these guys by myself, he said looking in front of him and seeing the grins on the Scarlet members. Feeling lucky? Asked the blonde, or do you feel stupid? He asked again as he shot a fireball in one of the unsuspecting man and making him fly in a nearby pylon. The fireball was rather powerful, even Naruto sensed it, the cracking sound of bones even showed it. You demon, shouted a crusade member. That was a bad move, the blonde snapped and slowly turned his head towards the idiot that said that. He turned his head so slow that it made many of the Scarlet Crusade gulp and take a few steps back once more. As Naruto made eye contact with the one that said that, he started glaring at him and focusing a large amount of killer intent of said person. The man started chalking on the air. The Crusade members looked at him in fear as he was chalking on the air. If the boy could kill them from such a distance, they would stand a chance against him, they would be doomed. Not to mention that he was now a demon, he looked like a demon and seemed to carry the power of one as well. All of a sudden Naruto disappeared in a swirl of flames, making the Crusade members stiffen and wondering where he went. All of a sudden they heard a gurgling scream. Turning towards the direction the sound was coming from, they could see the boy holding a chaplain above him, his hand through his back, coming out through the chest and holding the chaplain by the neck. The blonde snapped the chaplain's neck and took his arm out of him, letting the dead body drop on the ground. He slowly raised his head and looked around at the shivering Crusade members. He was spinning his sword through his fingers and smirking under his mask. Naruto stopped spinning the sword and sheathed it. He moved his hand towards a Crusade member and fired a frostbolt. The man narrowed his eyes and jumped away. The good thing was that the attack missed him, the bad thing was that it hit his companion that was right behind him. Said companion had a hole in his chest, his face turned white and he dropped on the ground dead. There was no blood leaking out, maybe because it was frozen in place. The Crusade members looked at each other and then at the blonde. They all charged him at the same time. Naruto spun on his left leg and grabbed a Crusade member by the face. He spun again and threw his victim at another Crusade member. He then ducked and avoided a sword. He jumped on his hands and used both legs to kick a Crusade member away. Naruto dropped on his stomach and rolled away, avoiding a rather massive axe. He then used his hands to lift himself up and stand on his feet. He unsheathed his sword and blocked an incoming attack. He saw a sword coming towards him through the corner of his eyes and dodged it by letting his body drop back. He then spun to the right, appearing in front of a Crusade member and kicking him in the chin, making him fly away and landing on 3 other Crusade members. The blonde then jumped on one of the pylons using his chakra to stand on it. He sheathed his sword and flashed through a series of hand signs. He closed his eyes and concentrated. 1. The building started to shake all of a sudden. The Crusade members were looking at each other in confusion and worried at the same time. All of a sudden what looked like a dragon's head shot from a nearby door, taking in its mouth more than 5 Crusade members. The dragon spat them out at the same time, throwing them in the masses. It then moved towards Naruto and moved in front of him while looking at the Crusade members. "WWH, what is that?" stuttered a Crusade member looking at the dragon both in admiration and fear. "Thought it was more of the late." Naruto grinned. "This is my little friend," he said with a chuckle. He then moved his eyes towards the ground and the dragon started moving towards the ground with great speed. A paladin raised his shield in an attempt to block the incoming attack. The dragon hit the shield and threw the paladin away like someone would throw a rock. The paladin hit a wall in the far back, making a big crack and breaking a few bones in the process. The mages turned towards the dragon and fired a frostbolt each. The dragon turned towards them and started attacking. It moved left and right, avoiding the attacks, though a couple of them hit the dragon and everyone saw that the dragon was freezing. Thought it was freezing rather slowly. The dragon opened its mouth and grabbed a mage and swallowed him. The Crusade members could see the swallowed mage floating inside the dragon's body. They could see him choke on the lack of air and die in a matter of seconds. The dragon then roared, making the Crusade members take a step back. Naruto grinned under his mask. But the grin vanished as fast as it came as he saw a fireball coming straight at him. The blonde's concentration broke and the dragon exploded, throwing water everywhere and letting the dead body drop on the ground. Naruto jumped away, avoiding the attack. He then disappeared in a puff of smoke. Everyone looked around trying to figure out where the brat had disappeared. Suddenly they heard something. They started looking around like a bunch of fools. Then the sound became clearer and they looked up at the ceiling. Their eyes widened as they saw the blonde standing on the ceiling, his right hand extended and a spiraling ball in his hand. The blonde then started falling down from the ceiling. He stretched his hand in front of him and the spiraling ball made contact with the ground. The result was immediate. The ground shook, then something like a wave moved in a circle around the boy and finally the area where the ball hit exploded, throwing crusade members in every single direction along with pieces from the floor. Dust covered the entire chapel and the people inside started coughing. Footsteps were heard from outside and an undead with a dark blue robe that had green lines coming down from the top and a strange staff in his hand appeared. The staff was double-edged, it had what looked like a big spike at each end and was surrounded by 4 more spikes and it was giving a deadly black aura. It also seemed like it had a white crystal on each middle spike. The undead looked around and it seemed like he whistled at the damage done. When the smoke cleared he saw Naruto in the middle of a large hole moving his right hand like he would be doing some exercise. The blonde turned towards the undead and looked at him. He nodded, recognizing him. The undead nodded back and looked around at the crusade members. They were groaning and wincing in pain. Some were unharmed while others were harmed beyond recognition. The undead eyed a weakened crusade member and grinned evilly. He moved his free hand towards the unlucky guy and opened his palm. A strange purple line shot from the undead's hand and connected with the man, making him glow purple. The man started yelling in pain and horror. Naruto watched amazed and shocked as the color in the man's face started draining. Then something rather scary started happening. The man's face seemed to be crumbling, like sand particles. In a matter of seconds the man dropped on the ground and exploded in particles of dust while a strange purple diamond or gem of some sort appeared in the undead's hand, who was grinning sadistically. He then moved his left hand, in which he was holding the staff, in front of him and opened his palm while holding the staff with one finger. He looked at the crystal and threw up in the air above his head. He moved his right hand behind him and opening his palm. The crystal dropped and stopped right above his head. A strange pentagram of some sort appeared under his feet and strange dark purple lines started moving from the undead's feet towards the crystal that was spinning above his head. Another pentagram appeared above his head and the lines started moving faster and faster while the crystal started shattering. "Come forth, Tancred, come forth and serve your master," he crackled evilly and sadistically. The pentagrams disappeared and the crystal exploded, the lines disappeared and a pair of dark red eyes appeared next to the undead. Then a body started forming, a pair of dark blue clawed hands appeared, then the arms, which had a big bracelet. On said bracelet were 3 green diamonds. The body of the creature was also dark blue, but said creature had no legs, instead there was a dark cloud underneath it. The creature was massive, as tall as the undead, and it was leaking demonic energy. "What have you summoned me for?" the creature demanded. "Cut the chit-chat," Sodrin crackled. "Go and kill, and I want blood, a lot of blood," he said, and before the creature could move he remembered about the blonde. "Oh, and be sure not to harm the kid over there," he said, pointing to Naruto. Tancred was puzzled why his master would tell him not to harm someone, especially a human. Usually he would just want every single human be killed, but as he was supposed to listen he didn't ask and did what he was told to do. He started moving towards a ground of Scarlet Crusade members. Said members stiffened and readied themselves. The Voidwalker reached a group of 5 warriors. One of the warriors let out a battle cry and charged forward with his sword raised. He lowered the sword and it went right through the Voidwalker, not even damaging it. Tancred moved his claw-like hand towards the Crusade member and swiped his chest, drawing blood out. It then grabbed his head, moved its free hand inside the man's mouth and forcibly opened it, but it didn't stop there. It continued moving his upper jaw till a snapping sound was heard and the man's head was broken in half from the upper jaw section. Blood sprayed everywhere and they could all hear the sadistic laughter of the undead. Naruto watched in awe and discussed what happened. He felt like puking after he saw the man's head being ripped in half. Naruto shuddering, thinking how the feeling of having your head ripped in half was. He looked at the undead and saw a strange black aura around his right hand that was outstretched towards a paladin that was charging him. Before Naruto could even blink, a strange bolt made out of shadow shot from the undead's hand and hit the paladin, sending him flying backwards. The undead then grinned deviously and fire appeared in his hands. He moved his hand towards the downed paladin and said person caught fire, literally. He was actually burning. Naruto was gaping at the sight. He didn't seem to hear the paladin scream in pain and agony as he was running around trying to extinguish himself. It didn't take long for the paladin to drop dead on the ground. The bad thing was that he dropped with his face towards the blonde. Naruto chalked on his spit. or was it dinner coming out? The man's face was red, extremely red, and parts of his skin were gone showing of flesh, or even the flesh was gone showing his bones. It didn't even help when he heard the undead laugh maniacally. "Boy," the undead said as Naruto looked at him, "come here, let us enjoy this," he said with a devious smile. Naruto, not wanting to get fried like the paladin, nodded and disappeared in a puff of smoke only to reappear near the undead. Sodren grinned at him and turned towards the masses of Scarlet Crusade members. "Watch," he commanded. A strange green aura appeared in his hands. It felt demonic and powerful. Naruto felt like it was draining his life, like it was sending him towards his death. Before he could ponder on it, the undead fired what looked like a green flaming skull towards a priest. The attack hit the priest, that turned white as a sheet and the life from his eyes nearly disappeared. Then the priest started screaming in horror as he turned around and started running. Sodren laughed at the scared priest. Sodren suddenly pointed towards a warrior, but nothing happened. Naruto wondered why he pointed at the guy. It was also strange that said guy was fighting the Voidwalker. Then the undead turned towards a mage, and this time a green line came out of his palm and connected with the mage. Naruto saw the color in the mage's face disappearing, and said mage was choking and holding his neck. He then dropped on the ground lifeless. Before he could ask what happened, he heard someone scream in pain and agony. He looked around and saw the warrior Sodren had pointed towards just a minute ago, holding his head and screaming. Multiple cracks in his skin started to appear and blood started oozing out. His eyes rolled back in his head and he dropped on the ground in a pool of blood. As the body hit the ground, a strange green portal opened and a massive demon came out. Naruto stiffened as he saw the demon. It had a pair of red demonic wings, 2 long horns on top of his head. His teeth were sharp and deadly, not to mention big. He had a 3-bladed shoulder pads on each shoulder, of course, pointy ears, 2 smaller horns coming out of his lower jaw. He had metal gauntlets in his hands with spikes, a metal belt with chains. Instead of feet it had hoofs. It had a long thin tail, a strange green blade that seemed to be burning green. The demon was red and well built, strong and powerful, also, the demon and chains circulating him. "This is new," the undead crackled, "but this will be even funnier." He shouted, "Attack, kill them, give me blood," he shouted at the demon. The demon glared at the undead. It seemed like he didn't like the fact that he was here. But it also seemed like the chains around him started glowing a deadly purple, and the demon suddenly turned around and lifted his sword. Then he lowered it and cut 2 Crusade members in half in just one blow. The demon let out a terrifying roar and the Crusade members around him took a few steps back. The demon turned around and lowered his sword on a warrior, cutting him in half, from the head down to his feet. Sodren smirked. It seemed like he was enjoying the show. He looked with the corner of his eyes and spotted 2 paladins approaching. He grinned as he pointed towards one of paladins. He then pointed again at the same paladin. He started moving slower and he was clutching his head like he was in pain or something. Sodren then moved his hand towards the second paladin and a dark aura appeared in his hand. He raised his hand and the color in the paladin's face drained as he screamed in terror and started running away. Sodren smirked and concentrated. His hands caught fire and he fired what looked like a fireball at the fleeing paladin. The fireball had a dark aura around it. As it hit the target, the paladin stopped dead in his tracks. He suddenly dropped on the ground dead, but there was no external damage on the paladin. The undead laughed at the dead paladin and looked at his companion that was on the ground panting while holding his head in pure agony. The undead concentrated again and a purple light shot from his palm and connected with the paladin. Said paladin turned to dust and a crystal just like before appeared in the undead's hand. "What is that?" asked Naruto looking at the crystal. "Soul shard," the undead replied with a grin. Naruto looked at the dust of the paladin and then at the shard. So that spell that the undead was doing was draining the soul of its target. But for what purpose? Surely it couldn't only be to summon demons. The blonde shook his head and looked back at the massive demon. It was taller than a normal human. Heck, it was taller than a night elf. It was as tall as 3 or 4 adults combined. The chains suddenly broke and the demon stopped attacking. It looked around and started laughing. "Now this is bad," said the undead as he stiffened for a second. "Meh, if he comes he is as good as dead," he said with a shrug. "What were those chains?" asked Naruto. "Oh, I was controlling him with those chains. Now that they are gone he cannot be controlled anymore," Sodren said with a shrug. It seemed like he didn't care what happened. The large demon moved his opened palm towards a Crusade member. A strange force started lifting the Crusade member up in the air and choking him. Then strange green lights started appearing that entered the Crusade member's body. The man started screaming and before anyone knew the man exploded, spraying blood and flesh everywhere. The demon laughed evilly and looked around sneering at the cowering Scarlet members. Naruto looked to see where the paladin from before was. It seemed like he had run away or something. That is before he felt someone behind him. Turning around he saw the commander there, Mograine. The undead also turned to look at him, rather bored. "You undead scumbag," he spat at Sodron. "Oh, it looks like the little whittle commander is angry. Oh, what am I going to do? Oh, look at me, I am trembling in fear. Oh, please save me from his wrath." He started laughing while holding his sides. Naruto started snickering, much to the annoyance of the commander. "Shut up, you scumbags," shouted the commander. Sodron smirked. He was about to do some damage on the fool when he felt something approaching. He turned his head and looked behind him. His eyes narrowed as he saw the massive demon approaching with a smirk on its face. He sighed. The demon was at the same level as he was. It could prove annoying. He looked at the blonde. "I will leave the honors of killing the fool to you. I will handle the demon," he said as he spun around and started walking towards the demon. Naruto grinned and cracked his knuckles at the commander. "Looks like it's just you and me," he said. "Ha, like a brat like you can defeat me, the greatest paladin," he shouted. Naruto yawned. "You bore me a lot," he said as he disappeared from view. Mograine stiffened. He held his sword in his hands tight. He felt something behind him. He spun around and raised his sword to cut. It was blocked by another sword. The blonde was there with his sword drawn. Naruto used his knee to kick the paladin away, making him take a few steps back. He then charged forward with his sword raised and ready to strike. The paladin shook his head and looked up at the incoming attack. With a shift motion he raised his sword and blocked the attack. Naruto grit his teeth. He was starting to hate this guy. He suddenly jumped back and winced in pain. Another tail returned. He had already lost count on how many tails returned to him. He looked back up at the Scarlet Commander and held his sword tightly. "I will finish this fast," Naruto declared before he vanished again. The commander stiffened and started looking around. He was trying to figure out where the blonde kid disappeared. Up on the nearby roof Naruto was walking slowly and getting in position. When the commander was right in front of him he unsheathed his dagger and jumped. He landed right on top of the commander and raised his dagger to strike. The commander punched him away and Naruto landed on his feet a few steps away. The blonde immediately charged again and moved his sword for a swipe. It was blocked just like he wanted. He spun his dagger on his fingers before he held it tight in his hands and stabbed the commander in the chest. Mograine grit his teeth in pain and jumped away. He extended his free hand and what looked like a yellow hammer formed in his hand. He threw the hammer at Naruto, hitting him. The blonde was thrown away, crashing in a nearby tree. He shakily stood up on his feet and looked around, and everything was spinning around him. He looked at the commander and saw he was coming towards him, but he couldn't move. It was like he was frozen in place or something like that. Mograine smirked and raised his sword. He lowered it on Naruto and made a cut on the blonde's shoulder. Naruto tried to scream in pain but found out that he couldn't even do that. This guy was tougher than he had expected. It was nothing like he had fought before. Suddenly he felt like his limbs were working again, just in time. The enemy's sword was above his head, dropping at a fast rate. The blonde blocked the attack, raising his hand. He saw the commander grimace. Like he had expected what he did to last longer, long enough to kill him. Naruto raised his dagger again and tried to cut the enemy's throat. What he didn't expect was for the enemy to grab his hand and twist it. This time Naruto screamed in pain as he felt his arm itching in pain. He jumped away and dropped his dagger and sword. He grabbed his twisted hand and looked at it. It was shaking because of the intense pain going through the nerves. Naruto grit his teeth and twisted his hand again so it will heal as it should. Naruto let his hands drop and looked at the commander, panting. He was going to pay for that, dearly. He took his dagger in his hand and sheathed it. He then took his sword and stood back on his feet. He couldn't use the dagger, but he will cut Mograine's head off with his sword, even if it's the last thing he will do. The blonde charged forwards and raised his sword. The commander raised his sword to block, but this time Naruto raised his knee again and kicked the commander in the stomach, making him bent down a little. He then kicked Mograine in the face, making him fly away and crash in the nearby wall. The blonde boy charged again, and when he got to his target he threw his sword up in the air above his head and grabbed the commander by the leg and started spinning with him around. After a few seconds he let go of the commander's leg. Mograine flew right in the nearby pile of bones and blood. Naruto caught the sword and charged again. Mograine jumped back on his feet and blocked the blonde's sword. He spun on one leg and cut the blonde on the back. Naruto grit his teeth and took a few steps in front. He turned around and stretched his hand. A dark purple light shot from the sky right on top of the commander that screamed in pain. Part of his skin seemed to have been burned. How do you know druid magic? He asked, stuttering in pain. That's for me to know and for you to never know. Naruto answered with no emotion. The commander narrowed his eyes and grit his teeth. The kid was mocking him. He charged forwards again and moved his sword for a vertical slash. The blonde blocked the attack and using his sword he raised the enemy's sword up. He kicked the commander in the chest, making him take a few steps back. Then he leapt forward and lowered his sword to cut the man in half. Mograine blocked the attack and punched Naruto in the face, making the blonde take a few steps back and hold his face. Mograine used this to his advantage as he grabbed the blonde by the collar and threw him the pool of blood and bones. He raised his sword and then lowered it to stab the blonde. Naruto narrowed his eyes and rolled away, then jumping back on his feet and delivering a kick towards the commander. Unfortunately, the commander managed to grab the blonde's leg and he tried to twist his left as well. Naruto, seeing this, spun in mid-air and freeing himself. He spun again and raised his leg to kick the enemy in the face. Mograine ducked and raised his sword to stab the blonde. Naruto narrowed his eyes and with a quick move he swapped himself with a log. Mograine looked at the stabbed log dumbfounded. He shook himself out of it and freed his sword from inside the log and looked around. Suddenly a pair of arms grabbed his legs and tried to pull him underneath the ground. Mograine managed to free himself before the hands pulled him underground and jumped away. The hands went back inside the ground and Naruto jumped out of the ground right in front of the commander with his sword raised. The commander raised his sword and stabbed Naruto in the chest. The blonde coughed and looked with wide eyes at the commander, who was smirking in victory. "Any last words, undead lover?" he asked. Naruto grinned. "Boom," he said. Mograine raised an eyebrow. Before he could react, light shot out of the blonde and he exploded, throwing the commander away. The real Naruto jumped down from a nearby tree right behind the commander. He raised his sword to chop the commander's head off when something grabbed him. He looked down and saw what looked like a tail holding him. He turned around and his eyes widened when he saw the demon behind him. Suddenly Naruto was lifted from the ground and thrown in the chapel's walls, making a huge hole. Naruto groaned and looked around. The demon was attacking Sodren again and it seemed like Mograine was charging the undead as well. Naruto used a quick substitution jutsu to replace himself with a dead body. He appeared right in front of the charging commander and delivered a punch in his face. Mograine was taken by surprise and he flew backwards in a pool of his own men's blood. Naruto appeared above him and delivered a kick in his stomach, making him gasp for air. The blonde then grabbed the man by the throat and threw him in the nearby fountain. He then jumped in the fountain as well and raised his sword to cut. He started lowering it without regret, but once again it was blocked by the commander's own sword. "This is getting annoying," Naruto said with a glare. The commander pushed Naruto away, making him stumble backwards and trip on the fountain's end. He dropped down on the grass and shook his head. He saw the commander approaching. Making quick hand signs, a dragon made out of water shot from the fountain and grabbed the commander by the leg and raised him up in the air and started shaking him like a rag doll. The dragon then threw Mograine on the ground, making a rather big hole. Naruto stood up and commanded the dragon to attack again. The dragon charged forward and entered the mass of smoke. All of a sudden the dragon exploded and water sprayed everywhere. The blonde raised an eyebrow, wondering what happened and how the commander managed to defeat his jutsu. As the smoke cleared, he could clearly see the commander inside a strange yellow to golden bubble. Naruto leapt away and appeared in front of the commander with his sword raised. He lowered his sword and it stopped right on top of the bubble. He tried a vertical slash, but the result was the same. The bubble prevented him from hitting the commander. Mograine smirked and turned around. "You got lucky today, but we will meet again," he said as he started running away. Naruto was about to follow him when he heard the demon yell. He turned around and saw Sodren standing in front of the demon that was on its knees and with its hands up in the air screaming. Flames appeared underneath him and started to consume him. In a matter of seconds the demon was completely consumed by the flames and a strange green portal opened behind him, sucking him inside. It then closed when the demon was completely sucked inside. "What happened?" asked Naruto. Sodren looked at the blonde board. "Oh, I just killed him," he said with a shrug. "So, did you kill Mograine?" he asked. Naruto narrowed his eyes and turned around. He started looking around, trying to figure out where he had gone. He cursed, realizing that the Scarlet Commander managed to give him the slip. He shook his head and turned to look at the undead that seemed rather pissed off. "Pathetic, you couldn't kill that paladin," he said, shaking his head. Naruto growled. "Oh, shut up," he said, walking over to the undead. "If it wasn't for you I wouldn't be here," he said angrily. Sodren shrugged. "Like I care," he said, dusting his robe. "Come on, let's go back," he said, walking away. "Hey, what's this about us going back?" asked Naruto. The undead turned to look at him. You were sent here to save me, he said. Naruto caught the sarcasm in that and raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Asked Naruto, sheathing his sword. Oh, you don't know? Asked Sodren, chuckling. This was all a test, he said. Naruto choked on his spit. A what? He shouted. The undead winced at the high tone. Damn, you could kill someone with that voice, he said. But yes, this was a test. What did you expect? He asked. Me, Sodren Darkfire, the greatest destruction warlock to ever exist, he shouted at the blonde. Me, the greatest warlock of doom, he asked with a dark and malicious laughter. Sorry Korg, couldn't help it. XD, please don't kill me. Looks to me like you got captured, said Naruto in a bored tone. Rather great you are, he laughed. Before he could even blink, the undead was in front of him, holding him up by the throat. Listen to me, brat. I got captured because I let myself get captured, as part of the test for you, he said angrily. What test? Asked Naruto in a squeaky voice because of the undead that was strangling him. The test to see if you are good enough to kill Kel'Thuzad, and it seems you are strong enough, he said, letting the blonde drop on the ground. Now move it, pesky human, we got work to do, he said, walking away. Naruto grumbled and stood up. It was all a test. I will get you for this, he thought angrily and glaring at the undead. The two started walking away and met light and heavy encounter on the way out, but with a flick of the hand from the undead the enemies just started dropping like flies. Naruto's sweat dropped every time he saw their targets screaming, running and dying. This was like a walk in the park for the undead. He was really strong, and it was now clear to Naruto that indeed all of this was just a stupid test. It didn't take long and the two walked outside of the monastery where they didn't meet anyone else, so calmly and slowly they started walking back to the capital of the undead. On the way the undead was killing a few insects and laughing maniacally. It made Naruto wonder if the undead was sane anymore. Hey, Naruto said suddenly as they were walking. What do you want now? Demanded the undead. What were those spells you used? Asked Naruto. The undead grinned sinisterly. One of them is called Shadow Bolt, and just as its name says, it hurls a bolt of shadow towards the enemy, injuring him and peeling his skin off, he said with a dark laughter. And why are you laughing? Asked Naruto. I love inducing pain and terror in the hearts of weaklings, he hissed. Naruto's sweat dropped. All right, he said, taking a few steps away from him. And the other spells? He asked. Curse of Agony, Corruption, and a couple more curses, one of them being the Curse of Doom, he said with a smirk. As you saw it, the victim dies the most gruesome death, and sometimes a Doomguard under my control comes from hell. He laughed. Wow, that's, interesting, said Naruto with a gulp. Warlocks were scary, really scary. Also I used other variations such as Immolation, that spell burns the victim alive. He laughed maniacally. Also there is Soul Fire, it burns the victim's soul and kills him. Drain Life, which does just what the name says, drain soul, and of course Summoning, he concluded with a shrug. Naruto nodded. Hey, how does the summoning work? He asked. The undead looked at him curious. Well, you open a portal with another dimension and call forth the demon, he said. Can you call anything else? Naruto asked. Like what? Asked the undead, not understanding. Well, let's say something like frogs, the blonde replied. The undead started laughing at him. That is the most idiotic thing I have ever heard. Frogs are good for nothing, just eating. He laughed and Naruto grit his teeth. Never mind, he said, looking away and making the undead curious why he asked that. If you want to summon a demon you need a soul shard and you need to concentrate on a dimension, he said, and then looked away. Naruto put his hand under his chin to think. If that was true, then when he would summon he could try thinking about his own dimension, and maybe he could create a bridge between his world and this world for the summons to pass. He would need Gamabunta's help anyway with escaping from under Sati. Naruto stood in front of his cell door. Sodren was right behind him looking bored. The undead guards opened the door and pushed Naruto inside. Hey, take it easy on the kid, Sodren said. Why would you care? A guard asked. He is just a human. Whatever, Sodren said, walking away. Just be careful, mistress would kill you, he said, making the undead gulp. They closed the door and Naruto sighed. Suddenly the blonde found himself in a fierce hug. He looked around and saw a pair of red-slitted eyes looking at his amused. Looking down he saw Phinia and Seiya holding him. He smiled and returned the hug. His left hand twitched in pain and he grit his teeth. Got injured, I see, said Kyuubi. The girls broke the hug and looked at the blonde carefully. Kyuubi walked forward and opened his palm, revealing a flame that was providing light in the chamber. He looked at the blonde and frowned when he saw the cut in his shoulder and the injured hand that was twitching. "You always get in a lot of shit," the fox said, shaking his head. Phinia walked over to Naruto and took his hand. "I can heal this," she said as her hands were covered in a white and she touched his hand gently. Naruto felt the pain disappear and his hand stopped twitching in pain. He looked at the girl and smiled. Phinia giggled at Naruto. "Let me heal you second wound," she said as she took a step back and her hands started glowing white. She raised her left hand up and white light surrounded Naruto. He looked at his injury and saw it was closing fast, very fast. He looked back at the girl and smiled. "Thanks," he said as he lowered his mask and sat down with his back at the wall. Seiya walked over to him and sat down next to him and held him tight. Phinia sat down to his right and put her head on his shoulder. Naruto sighed in relief and looked at Kyuubi. The fox had only 2 more tails. "So what now?" asked Kyuubi. Naruto sighed. "I found the way out of this place, but we will need to do some damage to get out of here," he said. The fox nodded. "By the way, why is there a different demonic aura around you?" he asked. "The undead I was supposed to save summoned a demon by mistake and the demon managed to hit me once," he said with a shrug. That was a rather weak demon. Low class it seems," Kyuubi said, shaking his head. "Pathetic that you let such a demon get the best of you." "Hey, I was fighting a paladin and didn't see him attacking," the blonde retorted. Seiya put her hand on his cheek and made him turn his head towards here. "Don't worry, the good thing is that you are alright," she said as she kissed him on the lips. Naruto moaned and deepened the kiss. The huntress smiled and put her hand behind his head and deepened the kiss as well. Kyuubi rolled his eyes and sat down looking at his nail. The two broke the kiss and looked at each other in the eyes. The blonde smiled at the huntress and kissed her on the nose, making her giggle. Naruto turned his head around and winked at Phinia. He moved closer to her and placed his lips on hers. The girl moaned and put her hands on the blonde's chest. Naruto deepened the kiss and the girl did the same, enjoy every single second of it. When the two broke the kiss, Naruto looked at her in the eyes and smiled. He kissed her on the nose just like he did with Seiya and moved back. Phinia put her head back on his shoulder, closed her eyes, smiling. Seiya put her head on his chest and snuggled. Naruto chuckled and held them close to him. "All right, lover boy," said Kyuubi. "What are your plans?" he asked. "First I need to find the right moment to break the door, then I need to fight my way out of here and then summon Gamabunta and run away," he replied. "But I need to make sure no harm comes to Seiya and Phinia." Kyuubi nodded. "The perfect moment would be right when the sun shines more brightly, in the middle of the day," he said. Naruto nodded. "Yeah, that means we have an hour to start this." He looked at the girls. "Could you let me get up?" he asked. The girls nodded and moved away. Naruto sat up and walked over to Kyuubi. He bit his thumb and flashed through hand signs. He slammed his palm on the ground. While he was doing that, he was thinking about the frogs and about his home. He called the name of the jutsu and a puff of smoke appeared. "Yo," he heard someone say. Naruto grinned. The smoke disappeared, revealing Gamakichi. The toad looked around trying to see through the darkness. Kyuubi made a flame in his palm and the toad looked at him. He looked at his tails and gasped, jumping backwards and right into Naruto's legs. He looked up and saw Naruto and his eyes widened. "Boss," he shouted. "You're alive," he said. Naruto nodded. "Gamakichi, I need your help," Naruto said in a tone saying that he didn't have time for discussions. "What do you need, boss?" the small toad asked. "I need you to tell Gamabunta and Gamatabi to be ready when I call on them," he said. "What for, boss?" asked the toad. "Time for a jail break," the blonde said with a grin, and the toad nodded, disappearing in a puff of smoke. "Ready, brat?" Kyuubi asked as he looked at the cell door. The blonde boy moved his hand on the door to try and figure out if there are any traps or if there is any kind of spell. He didn't learn any spell detection technique, but he was confident that if there was a spell placed on the door he could sense it. The blonde grinned and took his hand away from the door. He turned around to face Kyuubi. "Right, you remember the plan?" he asked. The fox nodded while yawning. Yeah, you blast the door and take care of the guards and I will carry your girlfriends," he said in a bored tone while looking at one of his tails. Yeah, the blonde said, blinking. The blonde turned to face the door again and took 5 steps back. He bit his thumb and started flashing through hand signs. Kyuubi opened his palm and a small fire appeared, lighting the room. As Naruto slammed his hand on the floor, he whispered the name of the jutsu and a pile of smoke covered the area. He took 2 steps back and waited for the smoke to clear, and as it did he smiled under his mask. Phinia and Seiya, who were standing next to Kyuubi, studied the summoned toad with interest. The toad was taller than Naruto by a head, it had armor on its wrists and body and shoulder pads. The toad looked at Naruto and Kyuubi and nodded. The blonde grinned at the toad. "Hey Gamatabi." The blonde saluted. "Hey boy." And, the toad looked at Kyuubi, who was grinning. Kyuubi," he said, a little unsure. Naruto blinked at Gamatabi. "Didn't Gamakichi tell you that you will meet Kyuubi as well?" he asked, curious. "Oh, he did, but," the toad scratched its head. "Well, let's just say that it's something else when you see him in person than when you hear about him." Hearing that, Kyuubi raised his head proudly. "Ah yes, my name is well known in the summon world, they tremble when they hear my voice." Naruto turned his head to face Kyuubi and gave him a bored expression. "Your point is?" he asked. The fox shrugged. "Just telling you what you should do," he said with a grin and showing his canines. "Yeah," the blonde replied, bored. "Anyway," he said, turning towards Gamatabi, "you know what to do." The toad nodded and turned around to face the door. It brought its hands together in a fist and grinned. The toad moved his right hand behind him and clenched hard. The blonde took out a kunai he hid in one of his shoes and got ready. Kyuubi grabbed the girls with his remaining tails, 2 in number, and also got ready. Gamatabi suddenly punched the cell door that was thrown away like a rocket in the wall. The undead guards blinked once, twice, 3 times. They looked at each other and blinked again, twice. They moved their heads to look inside the cell to figure out what happened. They met a fist each. The impact was powerful enough that it blew their heads away. Gamatabi jumped out of the cell and looked at the 2 undead. "Holy shit," yelled the toad. "I hope I didn't kill them," he said, poking a body that was twitching. Naruto walked outside and blinked. Are they dead?" he asked, uncertain. Kyuubi walked out of the cell as well with the 2 girls and looked at the bodies. "Yep, as dead as they can be." "Crap, I killed 2 people, I only wanted to knock them out cold," said Gamatabi, jumping away from the body. "Weren't they dead already?" asked Naruto, looking at Kyuubi. Let's just forget this," he said with a shrug. "How can something dead die again?" he asked himself, not knowing Naruto was asking himself the same thing. "What's going on? What was that crash?" Naruto turned around and saw 3 more guards appearing. They looked at the small group and them at the bodies and gripped the hilts of their swords tighter. The blonde glared at the undead and started flashing through hand signs. Gamatabi placed his hand on the boy's shoulder and they both disappeared in a puff of smoke, startling the guards. The 2 reappeared behind the guards and Naruto jumped up in the air and raised his kunai. He dropped on one guard and stabbed him in the head with the kunai. The toad grabbed the other 2 and threw them in the wall, hard. The blonde stood up and looked left and right. He turned towards Kyuubi and motioned him to follow. The fox raised the girls up with his tails and started walking towards the blonde. Naruto turned right and started running down the corridor with Gamatabi next to him and Kyuubi behind him. He closed his eyes and started retracing his steps from yesterday when he came back with the warlock. He was brought in front of the jailer that took his weapons and placed them on a rack. The blonde's eyes snapped open as he remembered. He turned right and started running through another corridor. Then he turned left again, only to come face to face with another corridor that had cells on each side and a total of 6 guards. The undead turned their heads towards Naruto and the group to see who had appeared. Their eyes narrowed as they recognized the blonde. They unsheathed their shorts and started walking slowly and cautiously towards the rogue. Naruto grinned and ran towards the guards, and as he was getting closer to them, one of the guards raised his sword and started running towards the blonde. The guard started lowering his sword to cut the blonde. The attack was blocked by the kunai. With a swift motion, Naruto took a large step towards the undead and stabbed him in the stomach with his kunai. He then twirled around and took the kunai out of the undead's stomach, spraying blood on the ground. Then he stabbed the undead in the back and kicked him, making the undead drop on the ground. He took the kunai out of the guard and cut his head off. The blonde then turned around and grinned at the 5 remaining guards, who were now trembling in anger. 2 of them charged forward with their swords raised. As they were about to lower them, Gamatabi appeared in front of them, punching their faces and making them fly away and hitting the far end wall of the corridor. Naruto jumped on the toad's shoulder and then in the air, he raised his kunai and landed on an undead, making him fall on the ground and dropping his sword. The blonde then started stabbing the undead in the face, completely destroying it. Naruto stood up and looked at the remaining 2 guards. The guards took a step back. The blonde, seeing this, charged forward, intending to kill them and finish this. As he reached the first guard, he crouched down and brought the kunai next to him. He then thrusted the kunai upwards and stabbed the guard in the chin. He took the kunai out and twirled around, appearing in front of the second guard and blocking the undead's sword. The blonde grabbed the undead by the chest and threw him in the nearby wall, making the guard drop his sword. While the guard was getting back on his feet, Naruto kicked him in the stomach and then slit his throat with the kunai. Naruto wiped the blood of the kunai with a piece of clothing from a guard and started running again, followed by Kyuubi and Gamatabi. As he reached the end of the corridor, he found the two undead Gamatabi hit with their heads stuck inside the wall. The blonde snickered and then turned right. He continued running till he reached a rather big door. He put his ear on the door and heard someone talking inside. The blonde took a step back and kicked the door open and walked inside. As he entered the room, he found himself face to face with the warden and two guards. The warden, which had a black trench coat and a dark cowl over his face, turned to face the blonde. Naruto waited to see what the warden will do and take action only after that. He saw the warden moving his hand inside the trench coat, and then he could clearly hear the sound of a sword being drawn. Naruto didn't wait anymore and charged forward, intending to kill the warden before he could draw his sword. He raised his kunai and then brought it down, trying to stab the warden in the head. What he didn't expect was for the attack to be blocked. The blonde's eyes narrowed when he saw the warden crouched and holding a sword above his head. The warden then kicked the blonde in the stomach, making his take a few steps back. He then jumped in the air and raised his sword. Naruto looked up and saw the attack and jumped to the side. The warden's sword hit the ground, making the ground crack. He then lifted the sword up and charged forward again, moving his sword left and right with amazing speed and making the blonde stay in defense. In the meantime, Gamatabi, who had already finished the two undead guards, was looking through the weapons rack with Kyuubi and the girls. The fox grinned and pointed to each weapon that belonged to his container, and the toad grabbed each one of them. Kyuubi then grabbed the sword and looked at the blonde, who was in defense even now. "Brat," the fox called out as he threw the sword towards Naruto. The blonde jumped up and grabbed the sword. All of a sudden he felt something grabbing his leg. He looked behind him and his eyes narrowed as he saw the warden holding his left leg. The warden spun around and threw Naruto in the nearby wall, making it crack. He raised his sword again and charged forward, and as he got closer he raised his sword and then lowered it with all his force to cut the blonde. Naruto unsheathed his sword and raised it above his head, managing to parry the attack. He grit his teeth in annoyance. He never expected the warden to be this strong. The blonde rolled away and jumped back on his feet. He turned towards the warden and studied him carefully. The warden turned slowly towards Naruto and looked at him. He bent forward and charged. The warden moved his sword to cut from the side, but the attack was parried. Naruto grabbed the warden by the coat and spun on his leg and threw him in the weapon racks. The blonde was surprised when he realized that he forgot to let go of the coat and he was now holding it. He was even more surprised when he saw that the warden's body had no flesh or muscles at all. It was all bones. The warden put his hand on his cowl and lowered it, revealing his head. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he saw that the warden was actually a skeleton. This was the first time he saw one, even though the druid told him about such things. The warden tilted his head to the side and looked at the surprised blonde. The blonde shook his head and charged forward once again. He moved his sword to the side and using all the force he could muster he cut the warden's head off. The skull fell on the ground and rolled away, stopping near the wall. The blonde grinned. It was over. Or so he thought. He raised his eyebrows when he realized that the warden's body wasn't falling. His eyes widened when the warden's body grabbed him by the chest and pushed him away. He watched amazed as the body turned towards the skull and picked it up, placing it back where it was. The warden then turned around again and looked at Naruto. The blonde didn't know if the warden was laughing at him now or anything like that, since the warden wasn't making any expression. "This is a skeleton," the blonde asked himself. "How do you defeat something like this?" he asked himself. His thoughts were interrupted when Gamatabi appeared next to the warden and punched him hard, making the skeleton fly in the wall and break. The bones fell on the ground and scattered. Naruto sighed in relief. Breaking the body should stop the skeleton. He turned around and started walking towards the group. He stopped midway when he looked at Kyuubi's amazed expression. Wondering what the fox was amazed of, Naruto turned around and his eyes narrowed as he saw the warden standing back up. His left hand was reforming as he was standing. "What the hell?" the blonde asked, taking a step back. "How do you kill something like this?" he asked. "I don't think we can kill him," said Phinia. "I sense a strong spell around him that keeps making him move. It would require a mage to break that spell, or a shaman," she said. "So what do we do?" asked the blonde. "We are running late as it is, therefore, we run," he yelled as he dashed out the door. Naruto looked at the warden again and ran out the door, followed by Gamatabi. He turned left as he came out of the room and started running down the hallway with the group behind him. He looked behind and his eyes narrowed as he saw the warden chasing them rather fast. He was starting to wonder what kind of spell was casted on the skeleton to make him run that fast. "Gamatabi, your job is done here," said Naruto. "Tell Gamabunta to be ready," he said. The toad nodded and disappeared in a puff of smoke. The blonde looked at Kyuubi and nodded. The fox threw the blonde's dagger towards him and then he threw his scrolls. Naruto pocketed the scrolls and looked behind him. The warden was still chasing them. He opened a scroll and 3 explosive tags appeared in his hand. He then pocketed the scroll. As he was about to take out 3 kunai, he heard Kyuubi calling him. "Brat, we have trouble," the fox shouted, looking up front. Naruto looked in front of him and stopped abruptly with Kyuubi. In front of them were 10 guards and 2 warlocks. He looked behind and saw the warden had stopped as well and was getting ready to attack. Naruto looked around trying to figure out the fastest way out. As he looked down, he saw some bars and behind them what looked like a sewer. The blonde took out 2 kunai and tied an explosive tag to each. He then threw a kunai towards the warden and one towards the group in front. Naruto tied the last explosive tag on the bars and moved next to Kyuubi. As the first 2 explosive tags exploded, Naruto activated the one tied to the bars and covered his head. Kyuubi turned around and moved the girls in front of him to protect them. When the tag exploded, Naruto turned around and jumped inside the hole, followed by Kyuubi. Once inside, he started running towards the direction he was running before, followed closely by Kyuubi. Naruto looked behind him again and his eyes narrowed when he saw the warden chasing after them again. He grit his teeth in annoyance and looked up front. His eyes narrowed again as he saw a large number of strange ooze moving around. "What the hell are those?" he asked. "Don't let them touch you," shouted Saya. "Those are oozes and they're poisonous," she said. Naruto nodded and ran straight through the strange things. As he was running, he saw that the creatures were alerted by his presence and started moving towards him rather fast. He looked at Kyuubi and saw that the oozes were ignoring him. They were all moving towards him. He looked up front and started adding chakra to his feet to run faster. He looked behind and saw Kyuubi was doing the same thing and that they were loosing the warden and the strange oozes. The blonde grinned and turned to look in front of him. He stopped abruptly and narrowed his eyes when he realized that he reached a strange junction for the sewer. There were 3 tunnels, 3 directions in which he could go, but he didn't know which way to take. If he was running through the corridors and the streets of Undercity, he would have realized which way to go, but this was beyond what he knew. The blonde looked left and right trying to figure out what to do. He could hear the warden approaching. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. His eyes then snapped open and he started running through the left tunnel. After running for a good 10 minutes, Naruto thought that he was going nowhere. He narrowed his eyes when he saw that the tunnel was coming to an end. The tunnel was open, but he couldn't see if there was something at the end of the tunnel. The blonde tried to stop only to realize that he can't. He slipped and fell on the ground and started rolling down. The blonde closed his eyes and expected to drop in a bottomless pit when he exits the tunnel. What he didn't expect was to hit something hard and to hear a growl. Naruto opened his eyes and looked down to see on what he landed. His eyes narrowed as he saw he was standing on an abomination's head and the creature looked pissed, really pissed. The blonde jumped away just in time as the creature tried to cut him with an axe. The blonde heard a thud and looked behind him where the abomination was. His sweat dropped as he saw that it hit itself with the axe. "Alright, which way?" Kyuubi asked as he landed next to the blonde. Naruto looked around and saw another tunnel. "That way," he said as he climbed inside the tunnel and started running. A few minutes later the group was outside. The tunnel led them outside. They would have sighed in relief now if there weren't any enemies around. As they got outside, they were surprised by a large undead army. More than 50 undead were waiting for them at the tunnel's ends. "Give up, human, there is no escape now," an undead said. "Tisk, tisk, you should have stayed put in your cell, brat," a familiar voice said. Naruto looked through the army and saw Sodren there. It was hard to recognize him now since he was wearing darker clothes and he looked scary, very scary. He really looked like a warlock now. "Come peacefully and we will not torture you that badly," an undead wielding a massive axe said. Naruto grinned. "I think I will pass," he said as he bit his thumb and flashed through a hand signs. He slammed his palm on the ground and shouted the name of the jutsu. The area was suddenly covered in smoke. "What did he do?" a warlock asked. "I feel a massive presence," Sodren said as he was looking through the smoke. When the smoke cleared, the undeads all took a step back as they saw Naruto standing on top of a toad's head, a rather massive toad. It looked as big as Lord Eren or even bigger. The toad had a pipe in its mouth and was looking down at the undead irritated. "Brat, this is where you were playing all this time?" the toad asked, his voice booming throughout the area. Naruto laughed and scratched the back of his head. Well, yeah, I could use your help if you don't mind. He said. I have no idea how you got yourself in jail, and I have no idea what those guys are, but they don't seem like a friendly bunch, so I will help you this time. Gamabunta said as he leapt away, making a massive distance between him and the small undead army. As the undead saw what happened, their mouths dropped, literally for some of them. Sodran and the rest of the warlocks were blinking like idiots at the sight. An undead turned towards the rest and looked at them confused and shocked. What just happened? He asked, and everyone looked at him with shocked expressions. Brat, do you know how much trouble you caused back home? Gamabunta berated Naruto, who was sweating bullets. When that hag hears what you got yourself into, she will make sure you won't leave the hospital for a long time. The toad shouted, making the ground shake and the bats fly away. He. Naruto laughed nervously. I'm sorry. He asked. Why didn't you contact us faster? Or did you get in trouble from the first time you got here? Gamabunta demanded. Naruto nodded. Well, when I got here for the first time, a bear was about to kill me. He said, laughing nervously. What, a bear? Jiraiya would be ashamed, brat. Gamabunta shouted again as he was leaping. Well, it was the shock of appearing in a place like this. Naruto said, crossing his arms and pouting like a little child. I couldn't have been that bad, said Gamabunta with a shrug. Naruto glared at the toad. I appeared in an area filled with snow, he said with a pout. Oh, the toad said. The group stayed silent after that. Naruto kept looking in front at a dark cloud towards which they were heading. He could see mountains forming in the distance. He started wondering where they were running. He hadn't devised a plan as to where to go once they are free, but he figured that if he sees a mountain, that means that he might be on the right way towards Arati Highlands. Nay, Bunta, said Naruto, how's everyone, back at home? He asked. Well, like I said before everyone, I worried about you. He replied. When Gamakichi came and told me you summoned him, I was about to tell Jiraiya, but when he explained the situation you were in, I decided to wait. I see, replied the boy. So, when will you come home and how? The toad asked, looking back at the blonde. He could also see that the girls' heads raised and they stiffened for a second. Don't know, replied the blonde. I don't think I will ever come back. I have too much to do here. He said. This might not concern me, but what do you have to do here? The toad asked curiously. I don't know that myself, but I feel that I'm needed here, he said. Besides, the blonde turned to look at the two girls. I have found something here that I was looking for back at home, he said with a smile. The toad nodded, understanding what he meant. Gamabunta looked in front of him and started jumping over the edges of a mountain to reach the other side. As he reached the other side, he stopped and looked around. What fucked up place is this? He asked, looking around. The blonde raised his eyebrows and looked down. The trees all had a deadly green color, like poison. The grass was a green towards black. There were dead bodies on the ground, or at least the remains of the bodies. Looking around, he could see several small villages that had houses in flames. He even thought that he could see something walking within the villages, but it didn't look human at all. Naruto turned towards the girls for answers. He didn't know this part of the world. He had never been here and he had never heard or read about this. Or so he thought. As he was looking at the girls, he saw them trembling as they were looking over the forest and villages. Kyuubi was twitching, and the grin present of his face could only mean that he had smelled opponents that he desired to fight, or at least that was what Naruto thought. What is this place? Naruto asked. Phinia looked up at the blonde, shocked. You mean you don't know? She asked. The blonde shook his head. I came to this world not long ago, he replied. But you said that Zagark gave you books to read, she told the blonde. Naruto tapped his chin, trying to remember if this area reminded him of anything in particular. He looked back at Phinia and shook his head, letting her know that he doesn't remember and he doesn't know what this area is. This is, she said, trembling, the Western Plaguelands. Naruto narrowed his eyes. The Plaguelands? He asked, looking back down. This isn't good. Oi, what is this Plaguelands? Gamabunta asked. Simply put, it's a place where the dead have risen from their graves and killed the inhabitants, then the fauna got infected by a disease and turned into this, replied Kyuubi with a shrug. What the? Dead rising from their graves? Asked the toad incredulously. That's what I said, Toad, replied the fox with a grin on his face. Should I turn back, brat? The toad asked. No, we need to keep moving forward, he replied. But we don't stand a chance here, we are too weak to fight the guys here, said Saya, bringing her knees to her chest and hugging them. I know, but we will try to sneak around everyone and go back to Arati Highlands," replied Naruto, looking around. "It should be to our right. If we keep going in that direction we should reach Arati," he said with confidence. "Are you sure?" asked Phinia, looking up at him. "Positive," Naruto said with a smile. "You can go, Bunta. With you around it would be harder to sneak," he said. "True, but you can't even hold me here anymore," the toad said as he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto landed on the ground and looked around. He heard Kyuubi land behind him and turned around. The fox demon was holding the two girls with his tails. The blonde turned around to see if there was anything or anyone here. He sighed in relief and turned to face Kyuubi once again. As Naruto opened his mouth to talk, he saw the girls and Kyuubi tense. The blonde spun around only to come face to face with a giant spider. The blonde gulped and took a step back. The spider made a strange sound and jumped towards the blonde. Naruto heard the girls scream right before he jumped out of the way. He turned around and moved his arm towards the spider with his palm open. The blonde shot a fireball towards the spider, hitting it in the head. The creature took a step back and lowered its head, then it started shaking it and then raised it up and looked at the blonde straight in the eyes and made the same horrific sound. It sounded like it was angry. The blonde was amazed that the spider managed to resist his fireball. Naruto was about to fire another fireball when he heard Kyuubi move. Looking towards his companion, he saw that he was taking steps back and gritting his teeth. He also saw the girls looking in front of them with horror in their eyes. Tracing their line of sight, Naruto saw what brought fear to the girls. Behind the trees and bushes a large number of red eyes were looking at them and spiders were descending from the trees, a rather large number of spiders. Naruto clenched his fists as he knew that he couldn't defeat them all. He didn't even scratch the first spider with his fireball. He couldn't do anything against the other. "Kyuubi, follow me," the blonde commanded as he turned around and started running towards the direction he deemed to be Arati Highlands. "Is there any way to lose these things?" asked Kyuubi. "If there is a river we could cross it, they can't follow us," replied Phinia, looking back at the large number of spiders chasing them. Naruto looked in front of him. The forest was coming to an end. He looked behind him and came face to face with a spider. He paled instantly and turned around, running faster. As he ran past Kyuubi, the fox looked behind and whistled. If he could, he would have fought all those spiders. He sighed. He couldn't fight them now due to the fact that he didn't have all his tails and he was carrying the two girls. As the blonde was running, he suddenly slipped and fell on his back. He was still moving on the slippery grass and before he knew it he fell in a river. Swimming back up to the surface, he looked around trying to figure out where Kyuubi is. Looking back at the shore, he saw the fox grinning at him. He raised an eyebrow, wondering why Kyuubi was grinning. Before he realized it, the fox threw both girls in the river right on top of Naruto and then dispelled himself, returning to his cage. The blonde swam back up to the surface of the river. He could hear Kyuubi laughing inside his cage. "Damn fox, why didn't you just jump in the river?" questioned Naruto. "Tch, I hate water, you should know that, brat," Kyuubi replied. Naruto sighed and looked back towards the shore. He could see the spiders there eyeing him and the girls, making strange sounds towards them. The blonde raised his hand and shot a fireball towards a spider, making it take a few steps back. It then turned around and started walking away, followed by the rest of the spiders. Seeing as they were leaving, Naruto turned his attention towards Phinia and Seiya. He grinned at them under his mask. "So what's next?" he asked. "Well, we should swim to the opposite shore and find our way out of Plaguelands," replied Seiya, and Phinia nodded in agreement. Naruto turned around and started swimming towards the opposite shore. The girls followed his example. Once they reached the shore, the first one out of the water was Naruto. He then helped the girls out, and once that was done, he dropped on the grass to catch his breath. "All right," he said, "now we need to." He blinked as he looked at the girls. Their dresses were wet, of course, but because of that they were exposed. Phinia and Seiya looked at Naruto in confusion. The blonde was looking at them and blinking like an idiot. Confused, the girls looked at each other and then at their clothes and blushed hard. Instinctively they brought their hands at their chest and kicked Naruto in the face, screaming, "Pervert." Of course a certain fox was enjoying the situation and laughing his ass off in his cage. "Sorry about earlier," said Phinia, walking behind Naruto. "Yeah, it was pure instinct, we didn't mean it," added Seiya, looking down embarrassed. Naruto, who was keeping his head up towards the sky to keep the blood from coming out of his nose, sighed. "I told you, it's all right," he said, lowering his head and looking up front. "Naruto, what are we going to do?" asked Seiya. "What do you mean?" the blonde asked, turning his head slightly. "Our clothes are wet, we could catch a cold," replied Phinia. Yours too, she then added. You're right, the blonde replied, but I don't need to change my clothes, I'm used to this, he said with a shrug. The blonde then stopped walking and started looking through his pockets trying to find any scroll that might contain clothes. Taking the scrolls out one by one, his eyes stopped on one that had robes in it. They were the robes he collected from the cave he was in a few weeks ago with Phinia. Opening the scroll, he smeared blood on it, and in a puff of smoke 2 black robes appeared in his hands. He handed one to Phinia and another to Seiya, who thanked him and accepted the robes. Once that was done, Naruto rolled the scroll and placed it back in his pocket and started walking again, followed closely by the 2 girls. The blonde looked up at the sky again. It looked like it was getting dark. It was strange, time must have flown really fast, or maybe it was this area in particular. As he was walking, he felt the girls take one of his arms each and walk next to him. He looked at them wondering if they were afraid or something. Looking around through the trees, he realized that this place was getting scarier by the minute. Suddenly Naruto looked behind as he felt something, but as he turned he didn't spot anything. Raising an eyebrow, he shrugged, thinking that he was getting paranoid. He turned around and continued minding his business until he felt the presence again. Freeing his arms from the girl's grasp and spun around, unsheathing his sword and getting in a defensive position. Once again he raised an eyebrow as he couldn't see anyone behind him. Naruto lowered his sword and looked around, trying to figure out if it was only him or if there was truly something here. He shrugged again and slowly sheathed his sword. Looking over the area again with a careful eye, he turned around and sighed. Did you feel something? Asked Phinia. Naruto nodded. I thought I felt something, but there's nothing here except for us and the bats. He replied, looking around with his eyes. This place is creepy, said Seiya, looking around. Without my bow and arrows I feel so helpless, she said, disappointed. Naruto put his hand on her shoulder and smiled. Don't worry, we will be out of here soon and everything will return to normal, he said, trying to reassure the girl. Seiya nodded and smiled at the blonde. Thank you, she said. The blonde nodded and started walking away, but after taking a few steps he stopped and spun around again, taking out a kunai and throwing it. The kunai was caught in mid-air by a skeleton hand. Naruto narrowed his eyes as 3 skeletons with plate armor on their bodies and massive swords just appeared out of nowhere behind them. The blonde grabbed the girls and moved them behind him. He then drew his sword out and got in a defensive stance. The skeletons were moving slowly towards them. Naruto could feel that they were powerful, just like those spiders. He wouldn't be able to defeat them easily. Suddenly one of the skeletons collapsed and exploded, his bones dropping on the ground. The other 2 turned around and one of them had his head chopped on and his body kicked in a nearby tree. The 3rd skeleton raised his sword to strike, but his arms were suddenly cut off. The sword dropped on the ground and then the skeleton crumbled in tiny bones. Naruto and the 2 girls looked to see who defeated the skeletons. Was it a friend of a foe? In the pile of bones stood a night elf, to the group's relief and to Naruto's surprise a female rogue from what it seemed. The woman, who looked to be around the age of 25, wore a strange helmet that covered half her face. Her eyes and cheeks were covered, but the top of her head and her lips were visible. Her shoulder pads reached up to the base of her mouth and covered half of her arms. She had a long black cape. On her chest was a leather piece with many pockets, brown color. She wore black leather gloves with a skull on them, a pair of dark green pants with numerous pockets once again, a dark green belt and brown shoes. Tied to her waist were 2 large blades that were glowing a mixture of green and purple. She had long green hair and she was studying the group, making Naruto stiffen. The woman then started walking slowly towards them. The blonde could feel the power radiating of her. If she was going to attack, he would stand a chance without calling out Kyuubi's power. Naruto's heart was beating faster and faster with every step the rogue took. He was tense and ready to act. He was ready to call for Kyuubi's power and push back the rogue in case she attacked. As the rogue got closer, she stopped just a few inches away from the blonde and looked at him straight in the eyes. Do tell me, she said in a low voice. Are you the rumored Byako? She asked. The blonde held his breath. She knew of the name. She could have been sent from Stormwind to find him and return Phinia. But there was something strange. She didn't have the Alliance tabard. In fact, she had no tabard on her. The blonde looked at the woman in the eyes. And what if I am? He asked. His voice held wariness. The woman put her hand under her chin. She started thinking. I would ask if you really kidnapped the princess, she said, looking at Phinia. The girl in question looked at her strangely. Why would you ask that? She asked in return. Obviously the boy is protecting you, so there is something fishy about the rumor. She replied with a shrug as she let her hand down. What rumor? Seiya asked curiously. It is said that a demon wearing a boy's skin, the blonde growled as he heard that, had kidnapped the princess with the intent to devour her or something like that. The rogue concluded as she looked back at the blonde who was growling. Phinia placed her hand on the blonde's shoulder. Don't listen to what they say, you aren't a demon, she told the blonde as she smiled at him. Naruto breathed to calm down and closed his eyes, he then opened them and looked at the rogue in front of him. Yes, I am Byako, he replied. The woman nodded. Figured as much. My question still stands though, what was your purpose on kidnapping the princess? She asked, stretching the word, kidnapping, to make her point. It's clear to me that you aren't hurting her, and from what she said you aren't a demon. I saved her, the blonde replied. Oh, the rogue asked, raising an eyebrow, and from what, may I ask? My father was going to send me to the Scarlet Monastery, replied Phinia, lowering her head and making the rogue look at her, so I asked him to take me away with him. She said, again holding on to the blonde. The rogue closed her eyes and sighed. Well, that scratches one bounty of my list, she said as she opened her eyes. Bounty? Seiya asked as Naruto narrowed his eyes. The woman nodded. I was going around Azeroth to look for the so-called demon and slay it and return the princess for the bounty, she told the group, and they all tensed and Naruto was reaching for his weapons. But, apparently the princess had a reason and she left, with her lover, she finished with a laugh. Naruto started gaping at her. He stuttered, how in God's name did she know that he was Phinia's lover? How did you know that? Asked Phinia with shock written all over her face. Seriously, the way he reacts when you tell him something and how close you stay to him and more things clearly state that you two are in love, she said with a straight face. Phinia blushed as she looked at the ground. Well, yeah, she said, fidgeting. Wait, the blonde said, shaking his head and making everyone look at him. You, he said, looking at the rogue, are you a friend or a foe? He asked with a glare. The woman looked at him and sheathed her weapons, she then hit the blonde on the head. Friend, she said, looking at the blonde with bored eyes. What was that for? The blonde demanded as he nursed his head. As a rogue you should have been able to dodge the fist, or catch it, she said. You did none of those. What kind of fucked up rogue are you? She asked. One that didn't get any fucking training, alright. The blonde retorted angrily. The woman looked at him with wide eyes. You didn't get any training? She asked, shocked. Are you insane? Going out in the world without training? She shouted at him. How do you expect to protect the princess if you have zero to no training at all? She demanded. Naruto growled at her. I did a pretty fine job so far, he said. The rogue raised her finger and moved it left and right. Not so far, till now is more likely, she said, deadpanning. I mean, you are a complete idiot coming here when you are this weak, she told the blonde. Hey, the blonde shouted angrily at the woman. Said woman sighed. Follow me, if we stay here any longer we will have to face more dead, she said as she turned around and started walking away. How can we trust you? The blonde asked. He had to be wary. The woman turned her head to look at the blonde with cold eyes and releasing a large amount of killer intent towards him. I didn't kill you, she said as she turned around and started walking. Naruto shivered at her cold gaze and deadly voice. He sheathed his weapons and took the girl's hands in his and started following the strange rogue. It was better not to get on her bad side and find out more about her. She said she was their ally, but who knows for how long that would be. As they were walking, Naruto saw that the woman was leading them towards the mountains, but as they were walking the woman stopped near a tree. She bent down and took something out of the bushes. Naruto tensed, getting ready for anything that she might have hidden there. He was surprised when he saw her taking out a bag and then opening it and taking out a tabard. The woman put the tabard on her and then closed the bag and sealed it away in one of the containers. As she turned around to face Naruto, the blonde's eyes, and Phinia's, widened when they saw the design. It was the same as the druid's tabard. It was the same tabard Zagark wore last time Naruto had seen him. The woman looked at them strangely, wondering for what they were so shocked about. She looked over her clothing but found nothing amiss. She then looked back at them, tilting her head to the side. What? She asked. Naruto pointed at the tabard. You have the same tabard as Zagark, he said. The woman looked at the blonde with interest. You know Zagark? She asked curiously. The blonde nodded. I'm his companion in traveling since a few months ago, he replied. The woman smiled at him. Oh, you should have said so sooner, she told the blonde, making him gape. Excuse me, Seiya said, could you tell us your name? She asked. The woman put her hand under her chin and smiled at the girl. They call me Tyresphase, she said, and I'm a combat rogue, she said. Combat rogue? The blonde asked. It means that I specialize in combat, she said with a bored look at the blonde. Right, the blonde said. So, you're from the same organization as Zygark. He stated the obvious, mostly trying to change the subject. Indeed, the woman replied. I am part of the Shimmering Winds, she told the blonde. Shimmering Winds? Naruto asked, raising an eyebrow. Didn't he tell you? The woman asked. That's the name of our organization, she said as she turned to leave. Hey, where are you going now? The blonde asked. The woman made a sign towards the group to follow her and continued walking. The blonde groaned and took the girl's hands again and followed the woman. As they were walking, the blonde looked up at the sky. It was rather frightening. It wasn't the normal night sky that he was seeing, no, it was different. For some strange reason the sky had a dark to red color. He could also see green lines. Naruto wondered why the night sky looked so strange. Was it because of the so-called plague that even the sky changed colors? Or was it because of something else? He didn't know for sure. He didn't know how to explain this. He tried to ask the damn fox for an explanation or for his opinion, but it seemed like Kyuubi had fallen asleep due to the fact that he wasn't responding when the blonde was calling for him in his mind. The young rogue sighed as they continued walking. It was strange, there were no enemies around now. Zygark once explained to him that when you can't see the enemy or when they are nowhere to be seen, it could either mean that they are hiding and waiting for the right moment to strike, or that the enemy isn't present in that particular area. Naruto wondered which one of this it was. Surely the undead would walk the entire Plaguelands and spread death and plague over it. As they were walking, Naruto could hear people not far away, talking and laughing. He looked around and saw that they were walking towards a light, or better yet, a multitude of lights. He wondered where the woman was taking them. He could clearly hear someone sharpening weapons, multitude of voices. He tensed for a second. Anything could lie in waiting once they reached their destination. Maybe it was a trap, or maybe it wasn't. As they continued walking, the group entered a clearing and now Naruto could see who was talking. In the clearing there were about 30 men and women of the Alliance. It was a small camp. He looked at them. There was a wide variety of classes such as warriors, hunters, druids, mages, priests and even shamans. One thing that caught the blonde's eyes was the tabard. It was the same as Zygark's and Tyresphase. Oi, a dwarf called as he looked at the night elf woman. Hoer, hey. He asked. Just a brat, a hunter and the princess. The woman replied as she sat down near a campfire. The entire camp stood silent as they heard that. They turned their heads towards the princess and looked at her. They then looked at the blonde and at the hunter. They looked at each other and then back at the blonde. One of them stood up and walked towards Naruto. He was a human mage, around the age of 40. He looked at the blonde and then nodded. Fits the description, he said as he turned towards Tyresphase. I hope you didn't injure them. You weren't here when we received the letter. The woman looked up at the mage. Letter, she asked. The man nodded. Leader said that Zygark's companion that goes by the name of Byakko kidnapped the princess and he was now protecting her. Figured that much, the woman replied with a wave of the hand. Yes, but what you don't know is that we need to look after them now that they are here. The man replied. Look after us? Phinia asked, not understanding. The mage turned to look at her and smiled. Yes, our leader clearly said that if by some strange twist of events you end up here, we are to look after you, guard you, in other words. He replied with a smile. Tyresphase groaned. I am to look after a brat? She asked, somewhat annoyed. Yes, you are, the mage replied. We will talk about this in the morning. I'm sure you three are tired. The man said as he looked at Naruto and the two girls. Seiya and Phinia nodded as the man motioned to them to follow him. The blonde looked around the camp and saw everyone smiling and nodding at Phinia. He walked next to the rogue and sat down next to her. The woman looked at him and narrowed her eyes. Seeing this, the blonde moved a little away from her. For some strange reason she seemed pissed, or so he thought. Naruto looked around the camp. He saw Phinia and Seiya enter a tent and then, a few seconds later, the mage came out and walked back to his post from what it seemed. He looked around at the members of the organization. They all turned back to what they were doing before, chatting, drinking, laughing and working. He looked back at the rogue next to him. Feeling a pair of eyes on her, the rogue turned to look at the blonde, wondering what he wanted now. She raised an eyebrow and turned to look back at the campfire. She wasn't interested in what he was going to say or ask. She just wanted to stay in perfect silence and enjoy the night while it lasted. But a certain kid wouldn't let her. What? She asked with a groan. Why are you all here? He asked. I mean, what are you guys doing in Plaguelands? He asked, looking around at the members of the organization. Leader told us to be here and help the Argent of Dawn in their fight against the Scourge. She replied with a shrug as she took a stick with some meat on it and started cooking it over the fire. So, you guys are helping the Argent of Dawn, the blonde said as the woman nodded. He then looked down at the ground. He didn't know what to ask or what to talk about. Hey, the blonde said as he turned to look at Tyrosphase again, you said you were a combat rogue. That is what I said. She replied to the blonde, why do you ask? She asked in return. Well, the blonde said, I was wondering if you could train me. He replied rather bluntly. The woman turned her head slowly towards Naruto. Why would I do that? She asked, taking a bite from the meat. Because I'm a rogue, but I don't know how to fight like a rogue. He replied with a stoic face. I tried to find a trainer but I had no luck. He told her. The woman sighed. What comes out for me if I train you? She asked. The blonde tapped his chin thinking. He then turned to look at the rogue. Information and gold, he said. The rogue looked at him. I see, she replied. Give me the information and I will start training you now. She said. Once your training is done you will give me the gold. The blonde nodded. All right, the Forsaken want Kel'Thuzad to die, he said as the woman looked at him. They always want him to die, that is old news boy. She said. Naruto shook his head. They are more desperate now, he said. And Kel'Thuzad is looking for something, he told her as he remembered what Razor told him. The woman looked at the blonde with wide eyes. What is he looking for? She asked. A strange power, I don't know exactly what. Also, Stormwind is occupied by the Scarlet Crusade and the king is acting weird, he told her. The woman looked at the fire and stood in silence for a few minutes. She then nodded and stood up and motioned towards Naruto to follow her. The blonde did as he was told and followed the rogue into the woods. Tyrosphase didn't move too far away from the camp. She stopped just a few meters from the clearing and turned to look at the blonde. Do you know how to vanish? She asked. The blonde shook his head and the woman gaped at him. How in Eloon's name do you not know how to vanish? She asked. It was more like yelling though. The blonde laughed nervously. I was never taught, he replied. But a rogue should know how to vanish, it's instinct, she said with her mouth wide open, which looked really funny considering she had her helmet on. The blonde shrugged. If you tell me what I need to feel when I vanish, or something like that, I can do it, he said. The woman breathed and nodded. Fine, you need to concentrate, you need to feel something inside of you, touch the energy that floats within you, imagine yourself vanishing from sight, she said. The blonde nodded and closed his eyes. He took a deep breath and then exhaled. He did as the woman told him. It felt strange. He could definitely feel something inside of him, something apart from his normal chakra, from Kyuubi and his chakra. It was a strange sensation. He imagined himself touching it, he felt it move through his body and then he imagined himself disappearing, vanishing from sight. He closed his eyes and looked at the woman who was smirking. Very good, she said proudly. What do you mean? The blonde asked. You can still see me. That's because I'm stronger than you and I can see you, she replied. To her the blonde looked transparent, but to others he might not even appear in front of them. You must know that when you attack, your stealth will be dispelled and everyone will be able to see you, she explained. So what is this stealth good for? He asked. Sneaking, stealing, grabbing information, assassination, you name it, she replied. Now, let's move on to some attacks, she told the blonde as she took out her weapons. The blonde did the same. He took out his sword and dagger and waited for Tyrosphase to show him what he needs to learn. The woman suddenly sheathed one of her swords and took out a knife and disappeared. The blonde looked around trying to figure out where she went. Then, he felt something behind him, something pointy. He slowly turned his head and saw the rogue there with her knife at his back. This is called backstab, she said. When you perform this you need to hit a vital part in your target's back to weaken him, she said as she took her dagger away and then kicked the blonde, making him fall on his face. What was that for? He asked. Get up. A little spar is in order, she said as she took a stance. The blonde saw that she wasn't kidding. He jumped on his feet and got ready. No magic, only weapons and rogue tricks, she said as she attacked. She moved her sword to the side and the blonde parried it with his, but the woman put so much power in that attack that it moved the blonde to the side. She then raised her knee and kicked the blonde in the chin, making him fly in a nearby tree. The blonde hit the tree hard. He groaned and stood up. Before he could even react, the woman appeared in front of him and hit him with her dagger. He didn't know where or how, but as soon as she hit him he started feeling dizzy and he couldn't move at all. He looked at the smirking woman wondering what she did. "That's called gouge," she said. "You hit your target in a non-vital area of the neck but where a nerve is located. Doing this will incapacitate your opponent, making him easier to kill," she said, licking her lips. The blonde slowly felt better and jumped away from the woman. He brought his hand to his neck and saw that he was bleeding, but not that much as to kill him. Tough, he wondered how she did that. Sure, she explained it, but it had to be more than just hitting the nerve. He looked at the woman wondering what exactly she did. He knew it had to be more. The woman smirked. "I see you realized," she said proudly. "When I hit you I only cut you slightly, but while doing that I pushed my energy through the dagger and then through the wound, towards the nerve to daze you," she said, and then charged forward again. The blonde ducked the sword. He then sidestepped the dagger. He was then kicked in the stomach and he dropped on the ground. The rogue grabbed him by his clothes and threw him away. The blonde hit the ground and rolled towards a nearby tree that stopped his movement. He groaned and stood up looking at the woman. "Why do rogues use gouge when fighting?" he asked. "I mean, if you want to kill the target, then why use gouge to incapacitate your enemy instead of just slitting their throat?" he asked in confusion. "Some rogues enjoy making their enemy tremble and give them a slow death. Gouge can also be used when you are fighting multiple opponents or when your opponent is much stronger than you and you need to devise a plan or make a quick getaway," she replied to the blonde's question as she charged again. The blonde saw the sword coming to pierce his stomach. He moved away and then looked up, narrowing his eyes when he saw the dagger coming down on him. To his relief, it stopped just a few inches from his face. But there was something strange about the dagger. It was radiating a purple color. As the woman took her dagger away, the purple color disappeared. "And that is what we call the sinister strike," Tyrosphase said. "When you channel your energy towards one of the hands that holds any weapon, your hand and weapon will move faster and you will be able to hit your target much more easy," she explained to the blonde. "I see," the blonde said as he looked at his weapons. "Also," the woman said, grabbing his attention, "believe it or not, you can create combos by doing almost any rogue attack." "Combos?" the blonde asked, raising an eyebrow. The woman nodded. "It means that you get faster, agiler and stronger until you use your combos for a deadly strike," she said. "How will I know if I make these combos?" he asked, curious. "Simple. If you feel 1 time faster, or 2 times faster, then it means that you managed to get combos," she replied. "But what exactly are these combos?" he asked. "They come from your energy. Whenever you use your energy for an attack, it rips in two. One of it will remain your energy while the other will turn to a more prominent energy, which we like to call combo. When we feel that the combo reached a certain point and cannot go up in power anymore, we use it in a mortal strike. And before you ask, both energies replenish themselves," she explained. "I see," the blonde said as he put his hand on his stomach and looked at it. He then looked back at the rogue. "Anything else you could teach me?" he asked. "There is much more," she replied, "but I will teach you 2 more things and then you start practicing trough spar," she said as she charged forward. "Try casting a spell," she yelled at him. Naruto nodded and brought his hand up and started concentrating. Fire appeared in his hand, and as he was about to fire, Tyrosphase appeared in front of him and kicked him in the chin, making his move backwards. He even felt strange. He felt the power from the spell disappear and that he cannot access his chakra. He got scared at that point and looked at the woman. Just as he was about to ask what happened, he started feeling his chakra flow again. "That is called the kick," she said. "If your opponent is a caster, when he or she starts casting, you kick them in the chin while sending energy through your leg. It will make the target's body not feel their energy anymore and they won't be able to cast any spells for a certain period of time," she explained as she looked at the stunned blonde. The woman charged again. "Try hitting me," she yelled as she sheathed her weapon. The blonde wondered if she had gone crazy. He saw her coming closer and closer and raised his weapon. All of a sudden she became transparent, and as the blonde lowered his sword, she just vanished from in front of him and appeared to his side. The blonde tried again. She ducked so fast that he didn't see her move. She then disappeared again, only to reappear in front of the blonde and punching him in the stomach, making him take a step back. She turned to normal then. "And that is called evasion," she said. "Rather handy if I do say so myself," she said with a grin. "To use evasion you need to concentrate on your energy and imagine yourself being able to dodge anything. You will become faster for a short period of time in which you can dodge weapons and attacks as long as you are stronger or at the same level as your enemy. If your enemy is stronger than you, then he will be able to hit you. Not much, but he will be able," she said as she stood up straight. Wow. That's really good and handy. The blonde said amazed, he would be able to dodge almost anything if he used that. I see you like it. Then let's start training you, the woman said as she unsheathed her sword and charged forward. Naruto yawned as he stretched on the ground. After sparring for a few good hours with the rogue, he managed to get the hang of the attacks she taught him. Then they headed back to the camp for some well-deserved rest. The blonde his eyes, he could hear something outside. It was raindrops, so it was raining outside. The blonde opened his eyes and looked out from his cover. It wasn't raining outside, it was pouring, and hard. It was hard to see in front of you, it was like a fog. The blonde groaned, he stood up and looked towards the girl's tent. A warlock and a mage were guarding the door. They didn't seem to mind the rain, not at all. Maybe it was because they faced this kind of weather before and they got used to it. Naruto rubbed his eyes and looked around the clearing. Everyone was out in the rain working, sharpening weapons. No one was hiding in the cover. He even saw Tyrosvase sparring with another rogue. They seemed to be moving very fast. The blonde was mesmerized by the fast movements of the two rogues. If he would train more, maybe he could reach that level of power and speed. He looked down at his stomach and placed his hand over it. He had another type of energy inside of him instead his normal chakra. He never imagined that. Now the blonde started wondering if all ninjas had the rogue skills. If they all had them, that would mean that they all had the second type of energy. It would mean that they would be able to do much more than they can do now. He wondered though, why no one ever felt the second type. Was it because no one concentrated hard enough? Or was it because back in his world they couldn't reach the second energy? He didn't know how to answer that. The blonde stretched his arms and walked out his cover into the rain. He didn't mind getting wet or anything like that. He turned towards the girl's tent and started walking towards it. As he reached the tent, the guards nodded at him, letting him know that he can pass. It was strange. Last night he told everyone that he was Byako. They didn't seem to even react to the name. Maybe in the letter they got from their leader they found out that he did it for Phinia, to save her. Whatever the reason, Naruto didn't care too much. He was happy tough that there was an organization supporting him and helping him on this journey. He nodded at the guards and thanked them. He walked inside the tent and looked around. He saw Saya sitting on the bed looking on the floor and Phinia was sitting at a table. The two heard someone enter the tent and looked to see who it was. They smiled as they saw the blonde. Saya jumped up and took the blonde's hand and dragged him towards the bed. She sat down and the blonde sat near her. The hunter put her head on his shoulder and smiled happily. She didn't mind him being wet. The blonde smiled and put his hand around the girl and looked at Phinia. So how did you two sleep? He asked, a little tired. Good, but why are you tired? The priestess asked as she stood up and walked towards Naruto. She crouched at his level and put her hand on his forehead. You aren't catching a fever, right? She asked, concerned. The blonde laughed and took the girl's hand from his forehead. Not at all. I trained a lot last night with Tyrosvase. He said. She taught you how to fight like a rogue? Saya asked, raising her head and looking at the blonde. The blonde turned to her and nodded. Yeah, I learned a lot of cool stuff. He declared. If I train more I will get more powerful and I will be able to protect both of you. He said as he held on to Phinia's hand tightly and onto Saya. The girls blushed at his comment and smiled at him. That's very nice of you, Naruto. Phinia said as she sat down next to the blonde. Naruto grinned. Hey, I need to protect my precious people, right? He asked as he kissed each girl on their cheeks. True, Saya said as she put her head on the blonde's shoulder again and smiled. But as soon as she put her head on his shoulder her eyes snapped open and she jumped on her feet, making Naruto wonder what was wrong. Something the matter? He asked. I thought I felt something, she said, a little unsure. The blonde stood up and looked around the room. He couldn't feel anything. He turned to look at Saya and ask her what she could have felt or from where when Kyuubi called. Kit, the fox said in his mind. Step outside, something is coming, he said. He seemed rather alarmed by whatever he had felt. I'll be right back, the blonde said as he walked out the tent, leaving two puzzled girls behind. The blonde stepped in the rain. He looked around. He couldn't see anything amiss and he couldn't hear anything strange. He started walking away from the tent and stopped a few meters away. He looked around again but he didn't see anything. He wondered what Kyuubi could have felt. He didn't see anything and he couldn't feel anything. As he was about to turn he heard one of the guards ask something. Hey, who's there? The guard asked. The blonde turned towards his left and saw a shadowy figure walking towards them slowly. It seemed like the figure was limping. It could be that the person was injured or something like that. He saw that the guards also noticed this. Hey, You alright? The mage asked as he looked towards the coming figure. Naruto was about to walk towards the figure and see who it was when he saw the mage tense. He then crouched a little and fire appeared in his hands. He fired a large fireball towards the figure that exploded on impact and completely destroyed whoever was coming. The blonde narrowed his eyes wondering why that mage did what he did. He was about to ask when he heard something moving towards them once again from the same direction. He turned to see who was coming and his eyes widened when about 50 or so blurry images appeared through the rain. Without a warning, a thunder appeared that lighted the area a little and Naruto clearly saw more than 50 skeletons with armor and zombies marching towards them. He heard that everyone had stopped what they were doing till now. Scourge! Someone shouted as a multitude of spells were fired towards the incoming figures. Naruto saw arrows flying towards the marching dead and hitting them, making many of them drop. The blonde saw the marching dead had stopped their march and then, they unsheathed their weapons from what it seemed and started charging forward. Attack! A warrior shouted as he charged forward with his sword raised. Naruto saw rogues, warriors, paladins, shamans and some druid charging forward towards the marching army. The two forces collided with each other. Skeletons and zombies were thrown away by warriors that used their shields to bash them. The blonde then saw something strange. Fire started dropping from the sky and on top of the marching dead. It started burning the zombies' skin and the skeletons' bones. It was killing them one by one and at a fast rate. He looked around and saw a mage holding his hand up and a small fire was in his palm. The blonde looked back at the marching army and saw ice shards dropping on them. He saw strange chains surrounding a skeleton and immobilizing it. A lightning bolt flew past him and hit a skeleton in the head, then another lightning that hit a zombie, then bounced on another and finally hit one more before disappearing. Hey kid, help us! A warlock called towards the blonde. Are you insane? The mage asked. They are on a different level from him. He shouted. Naruto looked at the fight and unsheathed his weapons. He started running towards the army. Hey, are you insane? The mage shouted. Naruto ignored the mage. He didn't know why, but he felt like he needed to fight and help these guys. He lowered his body to the side and then with a swift motion he turned his body and moved his arm that was holding the sword. He cut a skeleton in half. Its legs dropped on the ground. The blonde was about to take on another when he felt something grab his legs. Looking down, he narrowed his eyes as he saw the skeleton he had just cut holding him. His upper body was still moving. Suddenly a foot stepped on the skeleton's head, crushing it. The blonde looked and saw it was a warrior that had stepped on the skeleton. The warrior then turned his attention somewhere else and charged forward, disappearing in a blur and reappearing in front of his target, making it fly away. The blonde turned around and ducked a sword. He jumped to the side, avoiding a claw. Standing up, he concentrated and attacked. He moved his sword from the side to cut the skeleton. His attack was blocked by the undead's shield. The skeleton then tried to cut the blonde with its sword. Seeing this, Naruto spun around and hit the skeleton in the back in its spine and ripping it out. The skeleton dropped on the ground in a pile of bones. Turning around, the blonde ducked, avoiding a claw. His hand and dagger started glowing purple as he thrusted his dagger in the zombie's head. The blonde spun around the zombie while dragging the dagger inside the zombie's neck. He then took out his dagger and kicked the zombie in the back. He turned around and avoided a sword. He raised his own sword up, destroying the skeleton's arm, and then he cut the dead in half. Naruto looked around and saw two more zombies running towards him. He wondered how they could run. The blonde jumped in the air and landed on a zombie's head and planted his dagger in its head. He then jumped away and turned around only to see the zombie he had stabbed in the head in front of him, ready to strike. The blonde jumped away just in time, avoiding the zombie, but he then felt a sharp pain in his side. Looking behind, he saw a skeleton had stabbed him with its sword. The blonde kicked the skeleton and jumped away. When he was about to touch his wound and see the extent of the damage, he was surrounded by a green light and leaves started dropping around. His pain disappeared and he felt that he wasn't bleeding anymore. He looked behind and saw a druid there. I got your back, the druid shouted at him. Naruto grinned and nodded at her. He turned around and charged forward again. It was hard to fight in this rain. He couldn't see his allies clearly. The enemy was overwhelming them as it is. Suddenly a shadow bolt flew past him and right into a skeleton, destroying it. He started sweating. The spell was close to hit him. Naruto turned around and saw a skeleton behind him. He looked to his left and saw more coming. It was like they were coming for him and him alone. Naruto ducked a sword. He avoided a claw. But he couldn't avoid the second claw that scratched him on the chest. He jumped away and right into a skeleton's clutches. The skeleton started holding him tightly as the blonde was struggling. He saw the zombies coming towards him. He started struggling more. Suddenly he and the skeleton fell on the ground. he looked up and saw a rogue had destroyed the skeleton. "Get up," he shouted at the blonde as he avoided a claw and stabbed a zombie in between the eyes. Naruto jumped back on his feet and he was about to be hit by a sword. The rogue grabbed the blonde by the collar and pushed him away from the sword. "Idiot, pay attention," he shouted. As he turned around, a sword pierced him through the heart. The rogue yelled in pain and dropped on his knees. The skeleton took its sword out as the body dropped on the ground. Naruto looked at the body with wide eyes. The rogue died because of him, because he wasn't paying attention around him and he jumped into the midst of the battle blindly. What Naruto didn't expect was for a strange golden light to shoot from the ground where the rogue's body was and for said rogue to start moving. The rogue raised his head and growled at the undead that killed him. He rolled away and jumped on his feet and threw a knife in the skeleton's head. He then charged forward and started cutting it with his daggers so fast that Naruto couldn't keep up with his eyes. In a matter of seconds the skeleton dropped on the ground in numerous bones. "How the hell did he get me?" he shouted. "It seems like there are stronger ones amongst them, at the same level as us." A bear said that appeared behind Naruto, startling him. "Damn it, are there guys after the princess?" a warrior asked as he bashed a skeleton with his shield. "How the hell should I know?" the rogue asked as he grabbed a skeleton's head, ripped it off and threw it towards a zombie, hitting said zombie in the head and making it fall on its back. "Do you guys feel that?" asked the druid. They stopped fighting and looked in front of them. A massive shadow appeared, making them take a few steps back. As the shadow became clearer they could all see a lich. The lich was floating above the ground and whenever he breathed he would breathe ice. "Is that Araj the summoner?" the warrior asked as he looked at the lich. The lich looked around and raised its hands up and they started glowing light blue. Ice shards started dropping from the sky on the group. Naruto started avoiding them and so did the others. The blonde found it hard to avoid the ice shards. They were big and it was easy to be hit. In fact, he got hit 2 times. The blonde looked at the lich, a trail of blood coming down from his head over his left eye. Naruto was about to engage the lich when it looked at him and said something that stopped him. "Come," the lich said in an icy and dead tone. "Come towards me," it said, making Naruto take a few steps back. "Master wants you," the lich said. The undead around the ground started moving towards Naruto and only towards him. They were ignoring the other 3 members of the Shimmering Winds. They looked around curious. They were killing the skeletons and zombies and they weren't retaliating at all. They saw them move towards the blonde and started hearing Araj call for him. "Thereafter, him," the warrior asked. "Shit," the rogues shouted. "Don't let them get him," he shouted as he jumped in front of Naruto and started cutting through the army. Naruto shook himself out of his daze and started helping the rogue. He was kicking, slashing and killing every undead coming towards him. The warrior and the druid had joined them in the fight and they were helping as much as they could. But there were too many undead and they were reaching their limits fast. The lich started moving as it raised its hand and shot a frostbolt towards the warrior, making him fly away. It then raised his hands up and howled at the sky, a terrifying howl that made the 3 fighters shiver. Ghosts started appearing around them and moving slowly towards the group. Naruto started shivering as he saw them. He was always afraid of ghosts. And now he was more and more afraid. The closer they got, the scared he got. The rogue started fighting the ghosts. Naruto couldn't understand how those weapons could cut the ghosts, but those phantasms started dying. They would raise their hands up and howl before turning into a strange light purple globe and drop on the ground. The druid shifted back to his form and raised his hand in the air. "Lighting, strike my foes," he shouted as thunder was heard and lighting started dropping from the sky and hitting every undead around them in a 10-meter radius. The warrior reappeared and slashed a ghost in half and then bashed a zombie, ripping it in half. He then turned to Naruto, who was fighting a skeleton, and grabbed him. He flung the blonde over his shoulder and started running away. The rogue and the druid were following. The blonde wondered what was going on. "What are you doing?" Naruto asked. "First, you cannot face Araj, he is too strong. Second, you need to get out of here," the warrior said. "For some strange reason the scourge is after you," the druid said as he turned around and made roots shoot from the ground and grab a skeleton. The group passed the rest of the members. Naruto only now realized that he had advanced away from the group. He had been fighting alone with the undead until the rogue came to help. The warrior suddenly let the blonde drop and he looked around to see where he was. The rogue had dropped him right in front of the girl's tent. The 2 girls looked at him scared and jumped to hug him. "This is no time for hugs," Tyrasvase shouted. She was sitting on top of a lightsaber. "Are we ready?" someone asked, and Naruto turned to see a mage on top of a horse and a priest on another horse. Yes, let's go, shouted the rogue. Wait, what's going on? Shouted Naruto. Hindus reported that the Scourge are after you. They are too many for us to hold them off and they might harm the princess. We need to move you three out of here. The mage replied as he extended his hand towards Phinia, who took it and got up on the horse. Saya was helped on the priestess's horse and Naruto was told to get up on Tyrosves's horse. The blonde looked behind at the members that were still fighting. True to the mage's words, there were a lot of undead and the guys seemed to have a lot of trouble. But what was really strange was that it seemed like they were ready to run. Before Naruto could do anything, someone grabbed him and threw him on Tyrosves's lightsaber. The woman told the cat to start moving and the group started running through the rain. Looking behind, Naruto saw that as soon as they departed, the ones fighting disengaged and started running in all directions in groups of 3. Damn, Araj is pissed, he heard Tyrosves say as he heard a freighting howl. Alright, this is insane, a rogue shouted as he and the group were running. Behind the group a bunch of undead riders were trailing them and were getting closer and closer. Naruto looked at the riders and looked in front of him. They were riding through a mountain passage, rather narrow. He looked up at the cliff and then looked at the riders. He started flashing through hand signs. Earth release. Earth dragon missile. He shouted and a dragon's head rose from the ground and started firing mud missiles at the incoming riders, hitting them and making them drop from their horses and on the ground. The group, or more like the members of the organization, looked at the blonde with wide eyes. They had never seen anything like that. Such a strange spell, but it had such a great effect that it was a force to be feared. Naruto looked up at the cliffs again and moved his hand in his pouch. He took out a kunai and was about to take out an explosive tag when he realized that the scroll containing the explosive tags were back at refugee point. Damn, the blonde cursed as he looked at the rogue's back. He was on her lightsaber. Do you happen to have something that can explode? He asked. Tyrosves looked at the blonde and raised an eyebrow. Something that can blow, she asked, and the blonde nodded. Hey Kulian, throw me some dynamite, she shouted at a gnome riding a strange mechanical bird. One order of dynamite coming right up, he shouted back as he looked through his pouch and took out a big red stick with a wire attached to it towards the rogue. Said rogue caught the item and handed it to the blonde, who took it and looked at it strangely. You light the fuse and throw it, the rogue said, giving the blonde a match. Naruto nodded as he set the wire on fire and looked up at the cliff again. He rolled on the lightsaber so that he would face the sky and threw the dynamite upwards towards a pointy end of the cliff. The dynamite exploded right where the blonde had planned and chunks of rocks started falling on the road and right on top of the undead riders. The rogue whistled. Impressive brat, she said. That bought us some time, the mage said, looking back at the undead riders that were trying to get past the debris. I think we ran into more trouble, Silan, the gnome said towards the mage, who looked in front and his eyes widened. The group stopped abruptly and tensed. Naruto turned to see what was blocking their way. In front of the group stood 5 riders. Their horses' hoofs had a dark blue flame and they had a black armor radiating dark energy. The riders had a strange crown-like helmet. The top resembled a crown. The armor was massive and looked heavy. On the chest they had a skull. Their left shoulder guard had spikes coming out. Their knee pads had skulls that seemed to be screaming. Their eyes were cold blue and their sword had a deadly green or black glow. Crap, Tyrosves said as she looked at the 5 riders. This is the worst case scenario, she said, looking between the riders. Are those what I think they are? The blonde asked, looking at the riders. The mage nodded. Yes, those are Death Knights, he said, but not just any Death Knights, riders from Naxxramas itself. He said with a shudder. There is no way we can take those guys on, the rogue that had fought alongside with Naruto said as he moved back a little with his horse. The riders looked at the group and scanned everyone. Their eyes then stopped on the blonde. One of them moved forward with his horse, making the group move back a little. The rider stopped a few feet away from his companions and extended his arm towards the blonde. Come with us, he said in a ghostly voice, making everyone shiver. Okay, what now? The gnome asked. Naruto looked around trying to find a way out of this place, but everywhere he looked he could see rocks and rocks again. Suddenly something caught his eyes. He looked towards the gnome and shouted at him. Throw me some dynamite, he said. The gnome looked at him strangely. What for? You can't take these guys out with dynamite, he said. Just give me some, the blonde replied. The gnome nodded and threw a small container towards the blonde. You will find matches inside as well, he said. The blonde nodded and jumped off the lightsaber. Hey, scary tin can men, the blonde shouted towards the riders, making them look at each other in question. Catch me if you can. He shouted as he started running away towards the direction they just came from. What are you doing? Tyrosphes shouted in anger. I know what I'm doing. You get to refugee point, and I'll meet you there. He shouted as she started running faster. The knights, seeing the blonde run away, ordered their horses to chase after the blonde. They passed the group without even doing anything and started moving after the blonde himself. The group looked at what just happened in wonder. Was Naruto insane or something, or did he plan something? Whatever it was, they hoped the blonde won't get caught. After all, those guys are strong. Ignoring the girl's cries to stop Naruto and not let him go on his own, the group turned their attention towards Arati Highlands and started riding towards the refugee camp there. Naruto looked behind him and saw the riders coming closer and closer. He was pumping as much chakra in his feet as he could, but it seemed like it wasn't enough to shake these guys off. But that didn't matter. He had a foolproof plan and it was sure to work if he would work carefully. Looking in front of him, the blonde saw the entrance to the cave he spotted not long ago. The blonde grinned. This was going to be easy. His eyes narrowed as he felt an ominous presence behind him. Thinking fast, he dropped on the ground just in time. A rider passed by him and from the looks of it he was ready to grab him. The blonde looked around and saw the riders were circling him now. Looking to his left, he saw the entrance was not far away. The blonde stood up and looked at the riders. You think you got me? He said calmly, making the riders look at him and wonder what he was up to now. Hey! The blonde started doing hand signs, and when he was done he was surrounded by a cloud of smoke. The riders took a few steps back and held their sword tightly. Their master told them that he might use that power against them, and it was a power to be reckoned with. But they didn't expect what happened next. When the smoke cleared, they could clearly see 20 Narutos. They looked identical. The riders looked at each other and then at the blondes. The blondes grinned under their masks. Well, I thought you were going to capture me. They taunted at the same time. The riders looked at the large number of targets, wondering which one was the real person. They could cut through them and find out who was the real one, but the master had ordered them to bring him back alive. Therefore, if they would harm him, the master would raise their existence from the face of the planet. Seeing as the riders won't take the first move, the Narutos took out a kunai each and threw them towards the riders. Said riders moved their swords in front of them and parried the projectiles with ease. They then charged forward and started hitting the Narutos with their feet, and once they saw that they disappear when hit, they started kicking them more. Once the last Naruto disappeared, the riders started looking around trying to figure out where the real one was. When they couldn't find him, they started looking around the pass. It was then that they saw the blonde at the cave's entrance. Not wasting any time, the five started riding towards the entrance with the intent to end this futile game and capture the blonde. As Naruto entered the cave, he turned around and took some ninja wire out of his pocket, and then he took the dynamite. He started attaching the dynamite to the entrance in the cave as fast as he could. The Death Knights could arrive at any second after all. It took the blonde a minute to finish his work. When he was done, he turned around. He now had to lure the knights inside, and then it was over. Naruto looked around the cave. It wasn't an ordinary cave, it was big. He could see that the cave goes on and that there were many passageways. He snickered when he remembered how he tricked the horsemen. When he created the clones, he used a fast replacement jutsu to switch himself with a rock that was near the cave's entrance. It was easy and the riders feel for it. The blonde started moving through the cave. It wouldn't be long and the riders will arrive, so he had to think on how to make his plan work. He needed to trick them somehow again, or else his plan would fail. As he was looking through the cave, he felt something behind him. Turning around, he came face to face with another rogue, only that this one was different from the others. This guy was completely dressed in black, and it didn't seem like he was happy to see Naruto. Well, what do we have here? He asked as he looked at Naruto. An intruder, someone replied, and Naruto saw a mage with red robes appearing behind the rogue. Do you think those Stormwind scum sent him? The rogue asked. He seems weak, I doubt it. The mage replied. Hey, doesn't matter, his weapons will sell good on the black market. The rogue said as he moved towards the blonde. Naruto turned around and wanted to run, but he came face to face with another rogue. In fact, he came face to face with about 10 more rogues and 5 more mages. It seemed like the cave was these guys' hiding place, thugs from what it seemed. Naruto sighed in annoyance. This would complicate his job. He was about to try something when he heard a thud. The blonde, and everyone else, looked to see who fell down, and their eyes widened when they saw a Death Knight holding a mage's head in his hands and the body lying in a pool of blood at the knight's feet. The knight dropped the head and pointed towards the blonde rogue. He's ours, he said in a cold voice. The rogues looked at the Death Knight in fear. No way were they going to fight something like that. they didn't want to die yet. They all took a step back. One of the rogues thought he felt something behind him. Looking to see what it was, he realized that he couldn't see anymore. A sharp pain passed through him as he screamed and grabbed his face. His eyes were gone and another Death Knight was holding them in his hands. 3 more Death Knights appeared around the ground and unsheathed their swords and started moving towards the group of thugs. Seeing that there was no other way out, the thugs charged forward with the intent to survive the battle and escape. The mages fired frostbolts and fireballs at the knights, but as the spells hit, it looked like they didn't have any effect. The spells just disappeared in the knights' armors, leaving them intact. The mages started backing away in fear. One of the rogues jumped to cut a Death Knight. Just as he was about to drop on top of his target, said target grabbed him by the neck and snapped it without breaking a sweat. The rider let the body drop on the ground and looked at the remaining thugs, waiting for the next foolish one to attack. The thugs, seeing how easy one of their men died, decided against fighting and started running away with their tails between their legs. As the thugs were running away, the knights turned their attention towards the spot where the blonde should be. As they looked at that particular spot, they realized that the blonde wasn't there anymore. They started looking around frantically again, trying to figure out where the brat had disappeared. It was getting annoying. The brat was toying with them. If they could, they would just kill him and finish this faster. But no, damn Kel'Thuzad wanted the blonde alive. They spotted the blonde running towards what looked like an entrance in a passageway. To them it looked like the blonde was running blindly away from them, but they knew better. If he managed to drag them inside the cave, that means that he must be planning something. The knights looked at each other and nodded. They started running in different directions. One of them followed Naruto through the passage. As the blonde was running, he looked behind to see if his so-called hunters were following him. He only saw one Death Knight. The blonde wondered where the other 4 are. Surely they didn't give up on the chase. Looking back in front, he saw the passage coming to an end. As he came out of the passage, he entered a large room of the cavern that had pathways leading up and down. The blonde looked around and then looked behind and saw the knight getting closer. He took out a scroll and unsealed it. He then took out what looked like an explosive tag and sealed the scroll again. The blonde made a single hand sign and the tag was set on fire. Then he threw the tag towards the ground and it exploded, enveloping the area in smoke. It was one of the smoke tags the blonde had made a while ago when he was traveling with the druid. He had seen a rogue before using some sort of smoke bomb to disappear from sight. He considered it would be a good idea to use something like this to get away. As the knight entered the room, he looked around, trying to spot the blonde through the smoke. Slowly, the smoke dissipated and the knight found himself all alone in the room. He looked up, trying to see if the blonde was there, but he didn't see him there. He looked down to see if the blonde tried to run down. To his surprise, the blonde was there, although he was moving slowly. The knight realized that the blonde had used the smoke so that he could stealth. Too bad for him that he was weaker and that the knight could see him. The rider slowly walked to the edge of the pathway leading down in the room and unsheathed his sword. Said weapon started giving a deathly purple glow. It was becoming more and more accentuated. The knight raised his sword and swiped towards the blonde, unleashing a strange wave of purple energy towards his target. Naruto looked up and his eyes narrowed when he saw a strange attack heading towards him. He looked around, trying to figure out where to jump. If he would try to duck, the attack would hit the wall behind him and the rocks above would fall on top of him. He could jump up, but he wasn't sure that he would make it safely. Thinking fast, the blonde jumped from the pathway and landed on the other side of spiral leading down in the cavern. The attack hit the spot the blonde was a few moments ago, and as predicted by Naruto, rocks started falling down because of the attack. The blonde eyed the knight.